Chapter 1827. The Hydra was moving slowly on the sea. The yacht was on autopilot. Hi, I'm Kalon. Kalon walked over to Xianli. Lisa and Mo also followed them. Hi, I'm Xianli. Lisa moved closer to Xianli and asked, Did the president agree? Xianli shook her head. My uncle said that he'll only let me join the supernatural organization after I finish school. These adults are all like that. They don't care about our personal will. Kalon drank, depressed. Xianli looked at Kalon. You're not a member of the supernatural organization either? Kalon's father is an elite. He's the oldest member, Moore said. But there's a rule that if a member's family wants to join, both the member and the president must agree. You're lucky, Kalon said. You only need Mr. Chen to agree. Then can we join another organization? Xianli asked. Everyone looked at Xianli and couldn't help but roll their eyes. Sure, Lisa said. But the president will destroy that organization later. In all of North America, no organization can go against the president's will. Xianli thought of the battle last night. He'd faced the 5 legendary Romani Pillar Kings. In the end, he'd completed a one-sided massacre. Xianli also had a new understanding of the power of the spiritual world. In the past, she'd only thought that her father was powerful. At that time, she thought that there was no one more powerful than her father. She'd seen her father as her idol. However, during Warren's invasion, his father finally fell in front of her. The president is a very controlling person. If you're not related to him, he won't interfere. But if you're related to him, you have to listen to his orders, Moore said. Plus, in the L.A. area, apart from the supernatural organization, there's only the psionic team. That organization is the supernatural organization's enemy. I'm sure the president will be happy to get rid of them. There are other hostile organizations in L.A. Can't Uncle deal with them directly? That's not something that can be decided by force. It's very complicated. But if the president finds an excuse, he'll get rid of the psionic team without hesitation. But my academic performance is very poor, Xianli said with a sad face. If I follow Uncle's request, I won't be able to join the supernatural organization. There's a way. Go to Ruan Faxabin. Mo suddenly had an idea and said, Him? Is he from the supernatural organization? Yes, he's our alchemist. Maybe he knows how to make some potions to increase intelligence. Which one is he? That's the guy with messy hair. Moore pointed at Ruan Faxben, who was eating and drinking on a plywood not far away. Ruan Faxi was definitely the most aloof member in the association. It was mainly because of his habit of only coming out of the laboratory once every few days. Therefore, most of the time, his body carried a foul stench. It wasn't just because of the smell of his own sweat, but also because his body always carried the smell of some experimental materials. Luong, come here for a moment. Ruan Faxi looked up at Moore and the others, wiping the grease on his face on his clothes. What for? Hello, Mr. Luong, I am Xianli. I know you. You're the president's adopted daughter, right? Luong, Xianli wants a potion that can increase her intelligence. I wonder if you can get it? Magic potions can increase magic power directly, Ruan Faxi said. Other than magic potions that can directly increase magic power, other types of potions have the effect of fair trade. In other words, they convert your other strengths into the abilities you need. For example, the wisdom potion can increase intelligence but weaken magic power. Xianli, do you want it? Huh! Everyone looked at each other. They didn't expect the intelligence potion to have such a restriction. Then why isn't the magic potion limited? Of course. What materials do magic potions need? The most important is the skeleton of a powerful magic creature. Therefore, magic potions aren't regular magic potions. They're more like supplements. Is there no other way? Xianli obviously wouldn't sacrifice her magic power to increase intelligence. There is, Ruan Faxi said. The golden apple, the fruit of wisdom. You mean the golden apple in Greek mythology? Yes, it's the golden apple in Greek mythology. Ruan Faxi looked at Exionly. If you can find the legendary golden apple, you'll gain wisdom. In Greek mythology, the golden apple was a gift from a tree that Gaia, the mother of the earth, brought back from the west coast as a wedding gift for Zeus and Hera. Zeus planted it in the sacred garden and it was guarded by his 3 daughters, Aegle, Erusha, Hesperides, and the 100-headed dragon. In Greek mythology, the golden apple appeared twice. The first time was when Hercules completed the 11th of the 12 great feats, which was to obtain the golden apple under the watch of the 3 goddesses and the 100-headed dragon. The second time was during the wedding of the human hero Piraeus and the ocean goddess Thetis. Eris, the goddess of conflict and discord, didn't receive the wedding invitation. Thus, she purposely gave a golden apple to the guests, and claimed that it was for the most beautiful and powerful goddess. Queen Hera, goddess of wisdom Athena, and goddess of love and beauty Aphrodite didn't give in to each other. They all believed that they were the ones who deserved the golden apple. This golden apple eventually led to a war. Troy was destroyed by the Spartans. Can the golden apple gain wisdom? Moore asked. In Greek mythology, it doesn't say that eating the golden apple will give you wisdom. The golden apple can give you the ability you want, Ruan Faxi said. It's not limited to wisdom. It can also be your magic or other abilities. It's called the omnipotent fruit. But legends are just legends. It doesn't mean that the golden apple really exists. The Scarlet Mission includes finding the golden apple, Ruan Faxi said. Since the Scarlet Church believes that the golden apple exists, it's very likely that it does. Are there any clues? In the British Museum, there's an ancient book called the Book of Prometheus. It's said that this book records everything from the beginning to the end of Greek mythology. Chapter 1828. Stealing the Book of Prometheus from the British Museum should be more difficult than studying, right? Chen Zhao said coolly as he walked over. Chen Zhao glanced at Lisa. She was a genius girl. Plus, he and Lisa had stolen from the museum before. So, Chen Zhao knew how difficult it was to steal from a museum. Chen Zhao heard the kids' secret discussion. Exionly saw Chen Zhao walk over. Clearly, he'd heard their conversation. If Chen Zhao knew, it would be difficult for her to complete the task. Lisa immediately looked away, afraid that Chen Zhao would notice something. Chen Zhao glanced at Lisa and then at Ruan Faxben. Moore was a hothead. He was also here, but he was definitely a pawn. Moer was a rash young man. Although he was also here, he was definitely being used as a chess piece by someone else. They were definitely acting. They probably wanted to trick Exionly into finding the golden apple. They were definitely putting on an act. They were probably trying to trick Exionly into finding the golden apple. They were definitely acting. They probably wanted to trick Exionly into finding the golden apple. Tricking Exionly was different from facing Chen Zhao. Haha! I was joking. Ruan Faxben laughed loudly. Exionly, don't take it to heart. Exionly clearly thought that it was because of Chen Zhao. Only Ruan would say something sarcastic. Uncle, give me half a year. In half a year, I have to find the golden apple. If I can't find it, I'll go back to school. Exionly looked at Chen Zhao seriously. After a moment of silence, Chen Zhao said, I can give you half a year, but you also have to agree to 3 of my requests. What requests? First, you have to make a phone call every day. Second, you have to carry a tracking device. Third, you can't kill anyone, Chen Zhao said. If you agree to these 3 requests, I'll give you half a year. If you refuse, you'll have to stay at home obediently. Okay, I agree. Lisa, Ruan Faxben Moore, since you 3 are so active in persuading Exionly, follow her. Don't even think about escaping. Lisa's and Ruan's cheeks twitched. This wasn't in their plan. In fact, their goal was to influence Chen Zhao through Exionly. They wanted Chen Zhao to be part of their plan. In the end, Chen Zhao did intervene, but not in the way they had planned. The two met Chen Zhao's eyes. There was a threatening look in Chen Zhao's eyes. The two of them could only put on a long face and admit defeat. Kellen immediately shouted, "Mr. Chen, what about me? What about me? Fuck off. Go find Elite. I have no objections if he agrees. If he has objections, then I can't do anything about it. Mr. Chen, let me go too. Help me talk to my dad. He'll definitely listen to you. Fuck off." Qin Zhao didn't want to get involved in Colin's family matters. After all, Colin not only had an elite behind him, but also his mother Amy. Moreover, there was a certain amount of risk involved in this matter. Qin Zhao couldn't influence an elite. Not even the slightest bit affected. As the saying goes, better safe than sorry. If Colin was hurt because of this, Qin Zhao would have to bear the responsibility. He didn't want to face his parents' questions. Of course, if Xian Li really wanted to go, Qin Zhao would do his best to ensure her safety. Apart from her personal weapons, Qin Zhao would also contact Mary, the 23rd generation. Mary had wanted to build a good relationship with Qin Zhao for a long time. It was just that in their first few interactions, Qin Zhao didn't have a good relationship with her. So, Qin Zhao believed that the 23rd Blood Mary would be happy to accept this task. Roar! Just then, a cheer came from the stern. Klaus and Elite were standing there. They were both wearing swimming trunks and in a diving position. "We agreed that no magic is allowed," Klaus said in a low voice. "I don't need magic to deal with you." Portia stood in front of the 3-story fence and watched the commotion below. These people were really energetic. Moreover, they actually dared to swim in the sea under the night sky. "Uncle and Elite, Uncle Klaus, I want to compete with you too." Jerlin ran to the two in her swimsuit and stood at the stern. Portia was speechless. She looked left and right, trying to find Qin Zhao. She wanted Qin Zhao to control Jerlin. Wasn't that too much? It was one thing for the two adults to go into the sea at night. Jerlin wanted to join in the fun too. This wasn't Bright Moon Beach. It was the sea with strong winds and waves. Klaus and Angelite's faces darkened too. Compete with Jerlin? It would be embarrassing if they won, and even more embarrassing if they lost. Of course, they couldn't lose. Unless Qin Zhao helped them cheat. But Qin Zhao was definitely too lazy to interfere. Then, the two of them would cooperate with each other. "Klaus and Elite," Qin Zhao said, walking to the stern. "Play how you want. Don't take care of Jerlin." Jerlin was a bit lonely at home. In fact, she could swim more than she could at home. Apart from a few children and King Kong, who was afraid of water, the others could swim and weren't slower than Jerlin. But they all gave in to Jerlin. Qin Zhao didn't think that this was good for Jerlin. "Dad, I won't lose." "Don't cry if you lose." "Humph, just wait and see." Qin Zhao rolled his eyes. "If you lose, you'll have to clear the plates later." "I won't lose. I definitely won't lose." Okay, get ready. Little Jerlin, get ready. Don't talk anymore," Fei Lai ordered. 3, 2, 1, start. Jerlin's reaction wasn't slow. She grasped the timing very well. Klaus and Elite listened to Qin Zhao's words. But it was impossible for them to not go easy on her. At least, the two of them were slower than Jerlin when they jumped into the water. It was obvious. One was a seasoned veteran, while the other was an enhanced spiritualist who specialized in speed. How could they be slower than Jerlin? But if they really started swimming, they'd quickly catch up to Jerlin. This was the difference in their nature. Jerlin's physique was good, but that was only relative to children her age. It wasn't that she could be compared to adults now. Of course, in terms of swimming ability, Jerlin was indeed not worse than a regular person. Just then, a wave several meters high rose in front of Jerlin, Klaus, and Elite. Apart from Portia, everyone knew that it was Qin Zhao. "Don't hurt Jerlin," Fei Lai whispered. "No, I know what I'm doing." With a splash, Jerlin was slapped into the sea. Klaus and Elite hesitated for a moment, wondering if they should dive down to save Jerlin. But Qin Zhao waved his hand at the stern. Jerlin was always under his control. He even knew her condition like the back of his hand. Chapter 1829. 10 seconds later, little Gerlin suddenly came out of the water. But he couldn't figure out the direction for a long time. He looked left and right on the surface of the sea, and finally saw the Hydra not far away. But Klaus and Ingelite were nowhere to be seen. Little Gerlin felt her nose sting. She secretly wiped her tears. Then she swam toward the Hydra. But Gerlin couldn't catch up to the Hydra yet. Suddenly, Gerlin's feet seemed to touch something in the water. Then the thing lifted Gerlin up so that she could stand on the surface of the sea. Amon? It's Amon! Gerlin cried in surprise. She hadn't seen Amon in a long time. Although she couldn't see Amon's full appearance. Just from the touch, she could tell that it was Amon. The 5 tiger generals and the dolphin family all felt different. Only when standing on Amon's back could she feel as solid as standing on land. Portia saw Gerlin standing on the surface of the sea. There seemed to be a huge shadow moving under the water. Portia couldn't help but feel nervous. She kept staring at the shadow under Gerlin's feet. The shadow moved all the way to the stern of the Hydra and suddenly sank into the water. Qin Zhao pulled Gerlin onto the boat. Dad, Amon's back. Amon sent me back just now. Amon? Portia's face was filled with confusion. Who was Amon? Is that the thing in the water? It felt bigger than a shark. Was it a whale? Portia was no longer surprised by Qin Zhao's whale rearing. He could even raise sharks, let alone whales. Whales were recognized as more intelligent than sharks. They were the most intelligent species in the ocean. An important factor to judge a creature's intelligence was whether it had rationality other than killing when facing creatures weaker than itself. For example, killer whales would treat prey as toys. This was an expression of rationality. It wouldn't just treat other creatures as food. Perhaps for killer whales, simple survival was too boring. Killer whales were so powerful that they didn't need to think about food anymore. Even the largest creatures in the ocean were on their list of food. So now, they needed to think about how to improve their quality of life. Entertainment was actually a way to improve one's quality of life. After humans were no longer affected by food and the environment, they began to develop further in society. Of course, at the same time, with enough food and a stable environment, human intelligence also began to increase by leaps and bounds. From the perspective of biological evolution, this kind of evolution was natural. The orca's current intelligence and their dominance in the ocean were already close to the primitive social form of humans. However, the killer whale could no longer grow. This was because the development of mankind had caused them to lose the space to grow. If humans were still in a feudal society, perhaps the killer whales would have a chance. However, ever since mankind had entered the stage of technological explosion, their martial prowess had increased by tens of thousands of times. Even if the killer whales had the same intelligence as humans, they couldn't reverse this relationship. Just like the movie Rise of the Planet of the Apes, it was impossible to happen in reality. Could one or a few chimpanzees with the same intelligence as humans really overthrow the rule of humans? How was this possible? Even within the same species, humans would kill each other due to skin color, let alone another species. Of course, a movie was still a movie. It was just an artistic process and an exaggeration of the plot. That would never happen in real life. Even if the leaders of the human army were a group of monkeys, they wouldn't lose. Actually, Amon wasn't the only one back. Little Nine was back too. Today was the monthly payday. Qin Zhao threw 2 demonic crystals into the water. The Hydra stopped. Portia looked at the vast night sky. Weren't they worried about Klaus and Ingelite, who'd been swimming for an hour? Portia knew the two and had been worried for them for a long time. In the end, the two swam back after an hour and a half. Without using magic, Ingelite might not be Klaus' match. Of course, even so, he wasn't weaker than Klaus. The difference wasn't obvious. Little Gerlin ran up to them and threatened. Uncle Klaus, Uncle Ingelite, I'll definitely defeat you in the future. Then, Gerlin suffered from Qin Zhao's revenge. She pinched her face and flicked her nose. Little Gerlin escaped pathetically. Amon found a sunken ship at the bottom of the sea. It seems to be transporting gold. It's more than 30 nautical miles from here. What do you think? Are you interested in going? Everyone looked at Qin Zhao with shining eyes. Even Portia was a bit dazed. Sunken ship? Transporting gold? Roar! I'm going! I'm going to get rich! Lisa yelled. Treasure hunt, treasure hunt! I'm going to salvage the sunken ship! Eric was even more excited. After all, he just learned a sea creature form and was worried about where to use it. He didn't expect to have a chance to use it now. The others were also very excited. Who wouldn't love gold? Feilai walked up to Qin Zhao. Darling, is there a lot of gold in that sunken ship? Probably more than $10 million in gold and a lot of silver coins. The Hydra sailed toward the sunken ship. After 2 hours, the kids all went to sleep. However, the party on the ship continued. Portia couldn't help but wonder if a few of them would drown when they got into the water, considering how much they drank. We're here. This is the place. If you want to get rich, go into the water. One by one, they were ready. Except for a few, the rest were wearing diving suits. Not everyone could leave the air. Portia didn't want to miss this opportunity, so she also wore a diving suit. However, the sunken ship was more than 100 meters deep. Portia couldn't go any further after diving 20 meters. She could only float to the surface, depressed. Then, she looked at Qin Zhao's subordinates. They were all diving down crazily. There were even 1 or 2 who didn't even wear diving suits. They were a bunch of lunatics. Portia floated to the surface. Feilai pulled her up. Portia, come up, Feilai said, smiling. You can't beat them. Portia also realized this. Even if she wore a diving suit, she couldn't beat them. She really didn't know how they did it. Qin Zhao sat on the railing with his feet dangling outside, enjoying the sea breeze. Boss, aren't you going down to get some? You can dive down too, right? If I needed it, I wouldn't have told them the sunken ship's location. I'd run over myself and fish up all the gold and silver coins. Chapter 1830. Just then, a beam of light appeared on the surface of the sea. It was the light of a searchlight. A ship seemed to be approaching the Hydra. It was a fishing boat, but it was rather large. Its length and displacement were similar to the Hydra, but its tonnage was probably higher. The fishing boat stopped when it was about 100 meters away from the Hydra. The searchlight on the fishing boat shone on the Hydra. Just then, Qin Zhao heard the butler system's voice. Master, Merrill requests to speak to you. Merrill? That fishing boat over there? Qin Zhao thought for a moment and picked up. Hello, how can I help you? Hello, I'm Merrill's captain, Judge Bunchindien. The captain's voice came from the communicator. Our fishing boat is going to do salvage nearby. Can you please leave this area so that Merrill's fishing net doesn't hit your boat's propeller? It's not an open fishing ground, Qin Zhao replied. Captain Bunchindien, it's illegal for you to fish here, so I suggest you leave as soon as possible. On Merrill, Judge Bunchindien frowned. The people on the other boat really didn't know what was good for them. He'd already lowered his voice, but the other side still didn't know when to stop. Boss, we still have to use force, a rough man said. It's just a boat. What's there to hesitate about? Let's just sink it. We might even get some money. Take out all the tools and make it clean, Judge Bunchindien said expressionlessly. On the Hydra, Portia was shocked to see the fishing boat crash over. The yacht was made of thin steel and aluminum, different from the pure steel of the fishing boat. If it crashed over, the Hydra would definitely be cut in half. After all, it was a yacht. The hull was designed for comfort. Most of the modern fishing boats were designed to withstand the strongest winds and waves. Some boats even had the ability to break ice. As long as they were equipped with an icebreaker, they could crash into the floating ice on the surface. Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Portia screamed in fear. Glancing at Qin Zhao, she said, The kids are sleeping. Qin Zhao nodded and turned to look at Merrill. Merrill had been under Chen Zhao's domain the entire time. Within a radius of 1,000 meters, and on the sea. The Merrill wanted to ram the yacht, but it was obviously thinking too much. Furthermore, there were still a Man and Little Nine in the water. Portia discovered that although the Merrill had been rushing in their direction, it hadn't gotten any closer. Looking at its posture, it was clearly charging over, and the seawater was being pushed away. How could it not be close? Portia wasn't the only one who was confused. The people on Merrill were also confused. Judging from the traces of the current, their ship is indeed moving forward, but why didn't they approach the Hydra? At that moment, Gaia floated up from the sea and jumped onto the yacht. Portia saw that Gaia was holding 2 gold bricks in her hands. Portia sucked in a cold breath. Gaia, did you salvage this? Yes. Gaia took the towel from Fei Lai and began to wipe herself. We have enough money to buy toys for Evans. Chen Zhao and Fei Lai both smiled nonchalantly. Gaia was quite famous in the entertainment industry now. Plus, she had her private business and her famous fitness center. In the supernatural organization, her value was second only to Chen Zhao. Just these 2 gold bricks were really not enough to enter her eyes. They were just here for fun. Gaia looked at Merrill. What's with that fishing boat? It's probably from a private salvage company. They disguised it as a fishing boat, Chen Zhao said nonchalantly. Chen Zhao wasn't guessing blindly. The boom on the fishing boat wasn't used to pull nets. It was a lifting machine. Then, the people from the supernatural organization surfaced one after another. Portia looked at them. Each of them had 1 or 2 gold bricks on them. Her eyes were all red. She didn't have the ability, but these guys were too good at diving. Some of them didn't even need equipment to dive 100 meters deep and then float up with 2 or 3 gold bricks. Boss, if they're from a salvage company, why are they disguised as fishing boats? Portia asked, confused. Of course, Chen Zhao said. Salvage companies have to pay heavy taxes if they salvage a sunken ship. If they launder money, they only have to pay 15 to 20% at most. If they pay taxes to the government, they have to pay at least 45%. Also, some sunken ships are involved in international disputes. It's very troublesome to sue them in international courts, so they naturally have to disguise themselves as fishing boats. He knew so clearly mainly because he knew Guirette. Guirette's main business was piracy, but she also had other businesses. Salvage companies were one of them. Most salvage companies didn't register their business. Most salvage companies were in the business of salvaging wrecks and wrecks from the 18th and 19th centuries. Both were unpredictable businesses most of the time. The cost of salvaging wrecks was low, and they might not find them. In the past, the number of wrecks wasn't high, but it wasn't low either. They had to search with all their might. They might not even find one in a year or 2. Compared to the cost of searching and salvaging, the items that could be salvaged might not even cover the cost. If taxes were included, the salvage company wouldn't even be able to make a profit. Taking a risk out of desperation was their only choice. At the moment, the people on Merrill were panicking. They realized that no matter how hard they tried, the ship couldn't get close to the yacht. Even at full power, they couldn't move it at all. They wanted to escape, but they couldn't either. The entire ship stayed where it was. What do we do now? Judge Bangchen asked anxiously. He'd been in the salvage business for more than 20 years and had never seen such a strange thing. How about we ask the boss for help? One of his men suggested. Judge Bangchen Dian thought for a long time, but there was no other way. He could only ask the boss for help. Bangchen picked up the satellite phone. Boss, we've encountered some trouble. What trouble? We encountered a yacht that appeared at the location of our salvage operation. We negotiated with them, but they weren't willing to leave. Then, Bangchen Dian explained the situation to Judge Liu. Yacht? What kind of yacht? A very luxurious yacht with the Hydra logo printed on the hull. Boss, is this a Hydra organization? Chapter 1831. Hey, Guirette, how come you have time to call me? Chen Zhao was surprised by Guirette's sudden call. Is there news from Treasure Island? There's some progress, but we're still investigating, Gurette said. Chin, where are you now? Of course. Why do you ask? At home? On the boat? Gurette asked. Chen Zhao was stunned. He looked at the Merrill in the distance. That fishing boat disguised as a fishing boat is yours? It's mine, Gurette answered honestly. I found it, Chen Zhao said. It's been more than half a year. Got it. I'll have them leave now. Gurette wouldn't suspect that Chen Zhao was targeting her. The two were still in their honeymoon phase. They wouldn't scheme against each other over an ordinary boat. Tell them to leave this area, Chen Zhao said. Chen Zhao let the Merrill go. Portia didn't understand what the fishing boat was doing. It was going to charge over aggressively, but now it turned around and escaped. Portia didn't know. They could only escape with Chen Zhao's permission. The group of people played until dawn. Portia was so sleepy that she went to bed by herself. The next day, when Portia woke up, she saw the deck filled with gold and silver. However, everyone's share was clearly divided. Portia ate breakfast, which was as sumptuous as usual. But she still didn't see the chef. The supernatural organization didn't go into the water anymore. They'd fished out most of the gold that could be found. The rest had either sunk into the mud at the bottom of the sea, or they'd been washed away by the current. Then there was some silver. Silver wasn't very valuable. At least, it wasn't high on the market. They didn't want to waste any more time on silver. The Hydra finally returned to the ship. Other than the empty-handed Portia, everyone had a great harvest. The gold bricks all weighed 2 kilograms. Based on the current price of gold, each brick was worth $70,000 to $80,000. The gold content of these gold bricks was quite high. They should have been produced and crafted at the beginning of the last century. The more people picked up 3 or 4 gold bricks, while the less had at least 1. There were more silver coins, but the price of silver was much higher than gold tea. To them, this was a huge windfall. Everyone was in a good mood. Except for Portia. Portia, don't be disappointed. This is for you. Gaia stuffed a silver coin into Portia's hand as a form of consolation. Portia felt even more stifled. Xianli, are you really going to look for the golden apple? Fei Lai had already learned from Chen Zhao, and Chen Zhao had also agreed. However, Fei Lai's current identity was Xianli's adoptive mother. Chen Zhao still asked Xianli to convince Fei Lai herself. Auntie Fei Lai, can you agree? Actually, Chen Zhao had already told Fei Lai some of the reasons. Fei Lai was more worried about Xianli's safety. Fei Lai was silent for a moment. I only have one request. I'll agree to any request, Xianli said impatiently. He looked at Fei Lai with pleading eyes. If you're in danger, call your uncle. Okay, Xianli answered without thinking. Actually, Chan and I have been asking about the legendary Treasure Island, Fei Lai said. I hope you can come with us when we go to look for it. Xianli hugged Fei Lai, touched. She was in her rebellious phase. However, she was also the easiest to be touched. A person's intelligence usually reached its peak at around 12 years old. Adults only lack knowledge and a healthy worldview. Qin Zhao promised Xianli that he would let her go out for a walk. He didn't really want her to find the golden apple. Qin Zhao just wanted her to go out and build a complete worldview. Why were university students always muddle-headed for 2 to 3 years after graduating from school? It was because they couldn't build a truly complete worldview in school. This was also why people always joke that society was the best university. However, Qin Zhao's idea was that she had to go to school and train herself. School could impart knowledge and society could train her. Just then, Kalon ran in from outside, his face full of excitement. Fei Lai glanced at him. Kalon, what are you doing here? Miss Fei Lai, where's Mr. Chen? Here, sunbathing in the yard. Kalon saw Chen Zhao lying in the yard. Sometimes he really felt that Chen Zhao's lifestyle was like that of a cultivator. It was completely the lifestyle of a 70-year-old man. To any young person, sunbathing was unimaginable. Kalon ran into the yard again. Mr. Chen. Chen Zhao was dozing off. He pulled down his sunglasses and glanced at Kalon. What? Mr. Chen, my dad agreed. Agreed to what? Dad agreed to go find the golden apple with Xianli, Lisa, and Mr. Luang. An elite agreed? Chen Zhao was surprised. What about your mom? She agreed too. I see. I'll call and confirm, Chen Zhao said. Chen Zhao thought that an elite wouldn't agree. After all, Kalon was studying at UCLA now. It wouldn't be easy for him to convince his parents. Chen Zhao picked up his phone and called Amy first. An elite was a spiritualist, so it was more likely that he would agree. The possibility of Amy is not high. If Amy had agreed, then an elite should have also agreed. Hey Amy, it's Chen. Mr. Chen, did Kalon go to your place? Kalon said that you agreed to let him take half a year off and go find the golden apple? Yes, I agreed, Amy answered. Why? Mr. Chen, didn't you agree to your adopted daughter too? Since you can agree, why can't I? I have my own thoughts. Chen Zhao smiled bitterly. Chen Zhao stood up. He didn't care about his children's grades. He wanted them to have a complete world view and a correct way of thinking. I think that you'll find a way to protect Kalon, Amy said honestly. It's good for him to go out. He's never really left an elite and my side since he was young. I can't completely guarantee his safety. There's actually a certain amount of risk involved in this matter. There's no such thing as absolute safety. Even if you're at home, there's always the possibility of disaster falling from the sky. What does an elite think? He also agreed. Actually, it was an elite who convinced me. Chapter 1832. Qin Zhao had always wondered if the girls and boys in his family had switched personalities. It wasn't just Jerlin and Larissa who were lively and active. Even Mara and Sindora were very active. Unlike the 11 or 12-year-old kids, these kids already had a clear understanding. Mara and Sindora were the youngest of Qin Zhao's adopted children. They still needed their parents' love. Qin Zhao and Fei Lai were their parents now. Qin Zhao and Fei Lai were their parents, so they naturally doted on them. After the first few days of discomfort, they started to show their carefree personalities. Binance was also very carefree, but he liked magic more. Binance was a water magician. Qin Zhao didn't know any, but he could control water. Therefore, he could also give Binance some advice on this point. 11-year-old Kilo had become a fitness maniac. His body hadn't finished puberty yet, but he had to do more training than an adult every day. His training was similar to that of a professional athlete. Didi was the only one in the family. She was a girl from a rich family. At least in the eyes of Asians, she was a typical girl from a rich family. She was shy and introverted. She talked to everyone carefully. She also helped take care of the other kids. Today, after Portia came, Qin Zhao gathered the kids and went straight to Mirror Lake. Mr. Qin, how come you're free today? Felwood saw the large group of kids behind Qin Zhao. They're all my kids. I brought them here mainly to let them have some requests for their bedrooms, Qin Zhao said. Okay, I understand. Felwood nodded. The main construction of the villa had reached the end. Next was the renovation. Didi held little Jerlin's hand. The other kids had already dashed out. Holding little Larissa in his arms, Chen Zhao looked at the unhurried Didi. Didi, don't you want to see your bedroom as soon as possible? It's okay. I'll be there, Didi said. Although Didira was only 12 years old, her calm personality was even more stable than Xian Li's. It wasn't that Qin Zhao didn't like Didi, but he felt that kids should be more carefree. He could even accept Xian Li's rebellious personality. Didi La, if all those rooms are taken by your younger siblings, don't cry when that time comes. It doesn't matter. There are many empty rooms in this villa anyway. Indeed, this villa was larger than the old one, and there were more bedrooms and functions than the old one. Standing in front of the villa, a few children surrounded a person, one after another, making a ruckus. That person had a look of despair on his face. He was the interior designer in charge of the renovation. It wasn't that he didn't know how to satisfy these children's requests. It was because he couldn't hear their request at all. He wanted to shout at the children to stop, but he didn't dare to. As the company's designer, he also knew that Chen Zhao was the company's super investor. They were all Chen Zhao's children, so he had to take good care of them. Okay, say it one by one. Don't be so noisy, Chen Zhao said. Excellently, you go first. While the children were pestering the interior designer, Chen Zhao received a call. Hello, who is it? Hello, Mr. Chen. Hello, Ms. Blood Mary. Chen Zhao immediately changed his tone. Hello, I'm very happy that you called me. I'm sorry that my assistant had my phone before, so I couldn't answer your call immediately. It's okay. Mr. Chen, why are you calling me? Mary, the 23rd generation's blood, asked. Ms. Blood Mary, do you have any connections in England? What do you plan to do, Mr. Chen? My daughter wants to steal the Book of Prometheus from the British Museum. Huh! 23rd Blood Mary exclaimed. Mr. Chen, you won't be involved, right? No, Chen Zhao said. Mr. Chen, you want me to help your daughter steal the Book of Prometheus? 23rd Blood Mary was troubled. She was indeed very authoritative in Europe, but it didn't mean that she could do whatever she wanted. Moreover, England was one of the top countries in Europe in terms of national power and influence. 23rd Blood Mary's greatest influence was in the spiritual world, not the political world. Moreover, the British Museum was a national museum. Even 23rd Blood Mary couldn't help. No, Chen Zhao said. I don't plan on asking you to help either. If he needed help, Chen Zhao wouldn't ask anyone else. After all, he wasn't that familiar with 23rd Blood Mary. I just hope that you can help me monitor my daughter's group, Chen Zhao said. If there's anything exposed, help me cover it up. Of course, 23rd Blood Mary agreed without hesitation. So she was just helping to clean up some traces. 23rd Blood Mary quickly understood Chen Zhao's intentions. Chen Zhao wanted Xian Li to go out and explore, not have them seek death. Xian Li, Kalan, Moore, and Lisa had been together every day for the past few days. They discussed the information they'd gathered. Ruan Faxi was also actively preparing for the match. He wasn't going to find the golden apple. He was going to be a babysitter. Thinking of this, Ruan Faxi felt a headache coming on. He started regretting his stupid decision that day to encourage Xian Li to find the golden apple. In the end, he'd gotten himself into trouble too. Now, he could only force himself to be a babysitter. He also had to make sure that nothing would happen to the kids. If anything happened to any of them, Chen Zhao would definitely skin him alive. After leaving Mirror Lake, Chen Zhao took the kids to Mountain Town for a walk. The residents of Mountain Town had a much better life now. Comparing the profits of the beer factory also brought them great returns. With a stable job and income, they had more money in their hands. Of course, the Mountain Town government still wanted a share of the profits from Chen Zhao. Even the fact that the Dashan beer brand was originally owned by the Mountain Town government was brought up again. Fortunately, Chen Zhao had listened to Denver and bought out the entire Mountain beer brand. Legally, the excessive demands of the Mountain Town government couldn't be satisfied. Of course, the Mountain Town government's actions were quite shameless. But facing such huge profits, it was reasonable for the government to act shamelessly. Of course, Chen Zhao and Denver always ignored such requests. After all, they had the absolute right to speak. They could even threaten to fire the Mountain Town employees. Chapter 1833. Boss, are you familiar with the people here? Portia asked. Of course. My house is here. Of course I'm familiar. Portia realized that people would greet Chen Zhao wherever he went. It seemed that Chen Zhao really knew a lot of people. A few people sat by the flower bed across the street. They were the gangsters of Mountain Town. One of the women had a lollipop in her mouth. She looked across the street. Who's that Asian? I've never seen him in Mountain Town. He's rich. He lives by Mirror Lake. The typhoon flattened his house and it's being rebuilt. He's living somewhere else for now, one of the gangsters said. One of the gangsters said. Dash and beer is his business. Hundreds of families in the whole town have more money than him. So rich? The woman's eyes brightened. Asians should be easy to bully. We just need to scare him a little and we can extort a lot of money from him. Please don't. He's not a normal person. No one in Mountain Town dares to offend him. One of the gangsters hurriedly stopped her. Why? He's not a big deal other than being rich. You've only been here for a few months. You don't know how scary he is. Last time, a guy went to him and he beat him up and sent him to the ICU. Can't we just have a few more people? The woman's eyes flashed with ferocity. If we get a few more people, Mountain Town will be our territory in the future. If we throw a few Molotov cocktails at his house, I don't believe that he won't compromise. Guriel, do you want to die? The gangster glanced at the woman. I already said that we can't offend that guy. If you do, I'll back out now. Coward! Guriel's expression darkened. She was displeased that someone had humiliated her in front of everyone. I'll back out too. Me too. I don't want to go against Chen Zhao. Not every gangster in Mountain Town had interacted with Chen Zhao before. But they all knew what Chen Zhao was capable of. There were people who didn't believe him in the past 2 years. But they were all tortured to death in the end. A few people were still missing. A year ago, a gang came to Mountain Town. Dozens of people came to Mountain Town and stayed there for 2 days. Then, he heard that Mountain Town's rich man was Chen Zhao, so he brought a few people to find him. That night, the dozens of people disappeared. There was no evidence that Chen Zhao had done it. However, the residents of Mountain Town all thought that it was Chen Zhao who did it. In the blink of an eye, Gyunil realized that the hoodlums she had recruited with great difficulty actually had the same attitude on this matter. Unlike the other thugs, Nur had done everything. He had been an assassin for a gang, a mercenary, an informant for the police, and a bounty hunter. Gyunil was strong, brave, and ruthless. Seeing Chen Zhao's figure, Gurnier was even more displeased. If he could get rid of that Asian, then he would have the final say in Mountain Town. With that thought in mind, Gurnier strengthened his determination. Portia, take the kids to the car. Chen Zhao suddenly stopped and said, Take them home now. Boss, what are you doing? I suddenly remembered that I have something to do, Chen Zhao said. What is it? Why are you asking so many questions? Chen Zhao rolled his eyes at Portia. Uncle, do you need me to stay and help? Didira asked. Among all the people, only Didira knew what was going on. Chen Zhao patted Didira's head. No need. Go. Portia had a strange expression. What was Chen Zhao going to do? Didira actually asked if Chen Zhao needed her help. This family was full of strange things. Portia sent a group of children to the MPV and drove away. Didira, what's your uncle going to do? Nothing. Didira lowered her head and sank into her own world again. Xianli was also curious, but she didn't ask now. Xianli knew about Didira's specialness. Didira wasn't a witch, but she had a special bloodline. She had the legendary clairvoyance and clairvoyance. If visibility allowed, she could see a bug thousands of meters away. As long as the environment was quiet, she could hear murmurs thousands of meters away. Didira, do you need help? Xianli asked. Not really, Didira said. Didira had asked Chen Zhao if he needed help. She just pitied the woman called Gyur. That woman called Nur had obviously picked the wrong target. Suddenly, Gyur realized that Chen Zhao, whom she'd followed all the way, had suddenly separated from his kids and turned toward her. With a smile on his face, Chen Zhao stood before Gyur. Gyur's heart skipped a beat. She had a bad feeling. Gyur looked around carefully. There were no passers-by. There were no cameras here either. Gyur's plan was to attack in a more secluded place. But this place was fine too. Gyur looked at Chen Zhao. I heard you're very rich. I want to get to know you. Chen Zhao rubbed his nose. I don't plan on getting to know a scumbag. Gyur suddenly took out a dagger and charged at Qin Zhao. Gyur wanted to use Qin Zhao to establish her dominance. She wasn't afraid of killing people on the street. There were no passers-by here anyway. Plus, her experience in the past taught her how to get rid of all the evidence. Qin Zhao's right leg flashed, and then he pulled it back. Gyur felt her vision blur, and then she was sent flying. Gyur spat out a mouthful of blood. She felt like all the bones in her body were broken. Gurnir endured the intense pain and panted heavily, gradually suppressing the pain in his body. Then she stood up again. Qin Zhao was surprised that the woman could still stand up after being kicked by him. Gyur touched her chest. 2 of her ribs were broken. This injury wasn't easy to recover from. It wasn't that Gyur hadn't met opponents stronger than her. But she could stand to the end every time. Other people didn't know, but no matter how serious her injuries were, Gyur could recover quickly. She could also use her willpower to suppress the pain from her injuries. Qin Zhao also realized that Gyur didn't look like she was injured. His kick hadn't been merciful. Apart from not killing her, it could basically make her wheelchair for the rest of her life. But not only did Gyur stand up again, she didn't seem injured at all. In fact, her aura was even stronger than before. A spiritualist? She didn't seem to realize her identity. Qin Zhao wanted to see how much she could do. You seem to know how to take a beating. Chapter 1834. Gyunil charged at him again. In the end, Qin Zhao still kicked her away. Gyunil rolled on the ground in pain. This time, Qin Zhao used more strength in his attack. If she was a normal person, Qin Zhao's kick would definitely make her never walk again. But after rolling on the ground for a while, Gyunil actually recovered. Gradually, Gyunil stood up. She was covered in sweat, but the pain on her face was lessening. Qin Zhao tilted his head and looked at Gyunil. Gyunil panted heavily and her aura grew stronger. As if venting, she punched the wall beside her. There was actually a fist mark on the concrete. This wasn't something a normal person could do. Gyunil gritted her teeth and looked at Qin Zhao. I'm going to kill you! Standing where he was, Qin Zhao crooked his finger. Come! Gyunil roared angrily and charged at Qin Zhao again, punching at him. Qin Zhao also raised his arm and punched back. Crack! Gyunil's entire arm was crippled. Gyunil took 2 steps back and touched her weak right arm. Qin Zhao had broken all the bones in her arm. The pain was indescribable. But in just a dozen seconds, Gyunil's injury healed again. Qin Zhao still had a confused expression. Wasn't the speed of her recovery a little too fast? Her recovery speed was almost the same as his, right? Also, every time she was injured, she would become stronger. Where did this power come from? You can't kill me! Gyunil grinned at Qin Zhao. Then I'll kill you! Ner's forte was bravery and ruthlessness. She could also turn from weak to strong every time. Because she could always drag it out until she was exhausted, she would become stronger and stronger. Smiling, Qin Zhao stood there and looked at Gyunil. Looking at Qin Zhao's face, Gyunil hated him even more. She charged at Qin Zhao again, but her spine was naturally broken by Qin Zhao's kick. This was almost a fatal injury. But Gyunil stood up again. This time, her recovery speed was slower. But Qin Zhao realized another problem. Although Ner seemed to be stronger than before, but her face was getting paler and paler. It seemed like her recovery speed was beyond common sense. There was also a limit to his inexplicably powerful strength. Tell me, Qin Zhao asked. What's with this weird ability of yours? Gurnir's breathing became more and more rapid. She had never met an enemy like Qin Zhao. The tactics she'd used in the past to drag her enemies to death seemed to be completely useless against him. No matter how much stronger she was, Qin Zhao could still heavily injure her with one kick. Gurnir was initially full of confidence, but now he was starting to regret his recklessness. In the beginning, she dared to make a move on the street because she felt that no one could stop her. Even if the matter was exposed, the most he could do was run away. However, Chen Zhao was much more difficult to deal with than she had imagined. And Gyunil knew his own family well. She did not understand how this ability came about. She could gain strength through pain. The greater the pain one endured, the greater the power and regenerative ability one would obtain. She called this power the power of pain. She had never told anyone about this. She was afraid of being caught and used as a guinea pig. However, this ability was not without its limits. The power of pain had a threshold. Once it exceeded the threshold, the power would collapse and the body would suffer unimaginable pain. Gungnir started to become nervous, impatient, and angry. After this, she would definitely kill his entire family. Gungnir picked up the dagger on the ground. This time, she charged forward again. This time, Chen Zhao did not move. He did not even block. Gungnir's dagger stabbed into Chen Zhao's stomach. Gungnir was overjoyed. Success. But the next moment, she realized that something was wrong. She did not feel like she had stabbed into flesh. Chen Zhao did not dodge or block. He actually wanted to know how strong Gungnir was. Gungnir looked up and saw Chen Zhao looking down at her. Chen Zhao still had a smile on his face. Gungnir stabbed again. The result was the same. Gungnir's dagger was probably as strong as an automatic rifle. Chen Zhao reached out and pinched Gungnir's mouth. Gungnir wanted to open her mouth to bite Chen Zhao's palm. Unfortunately, she could not open her mouth at all. Chen Zhao glanced around. Gungnir's heart pounded. Chen Zhao's action was exactly the same as what she had done in the past when she committed crimes. Chen Zhao dragged Gungnir into the alley. Gungnir struggled with all her might. But she could not resist at all. Chen Zhao tossed Gungnir onto the ground and stepped on her palm. Chen Zhao squatted down before Gungnir, holding up Gungnir's crushed hand. As expected, Gungnir's palms started recovering. Gungnir raised her left arm and smashed it at Chen Zhao's head. Chen Zhao did not give her a chance to attack at all. He grabbed the incoming fist and squeezed hard. Gungnir screamed again. Gungnir screamed again. However, it didn't take long for Gyunil's fist to recover. Very strong recovery, Chen Zhao said, rubbing his chin. Gungnir was in extreme pain now. She regretted it. She really regretted it. She really could not offend this guy. He was a demon. I wonder if I can recover if I remove the entire arm. Chen Zhao grabbed Gungnir's arm and was about to use force. Thinking about it, he felt that it was risky. Forget it, Chen Zhao muttered to himself. I'll just remove one finger first. Gungnir screamed again. Chen Zhao removed the middle finger from Gungnir's right hand. But this time, Gungnir's finger did not grow back. Chen Zhao tried a few more times. As long as he did not remove all her limbs from her body could recover. Of course, the recovery speed varied. Chen Zhao stood up. He found Gungnir interesting. Klaus, come to Mountain Town with the helicopter. I caught an interesting lab rat. Hearing the word, lab rat, Gungnir trembled uncontrollably in fear. A sinister smile appeared on Chen Zhao's face. Are you scared of being cut up for research? Just as you thought, you will be sliced into pieces. Your blood, your skin, and your brain will all be stripped away. Gungnir struggled to escape, but Chen Zhao pressed her to the ground with one hand. She was terrified. She did not think that she would walk right into a trap and run to Chen Zhao. She wanted to use Chen Zhao to establish her dominance. In the end, she was captured by Chen Zhao as a lab rat. Right now, Gungnir wanted to cry. Chapter 1835. Gyunil was in the underworld. It wasn't that she hadn't seen evil people before. She'd even killed a few gang bosses. But now, she really regretted it. This man was even more evil than her. A few people from the association came. They were all curious. Who in LA dared to offend Chen Zhao? But they regretted it after seeing it. Gyunil wasn't strong. Plus, she'd been tortured so badly by Chen Zhao. The helicopter landed at the HQ and Gyunil was dragged down. Gyunil was in intense pain all over. The side effects of that ability had already appeared. The power of pain was spreading throughout her body. Gyno was tough and didn't make a sound. A few people from the HQ came over. They wanted to see who Qin Zhao had brought back. Gyno suddenly jumped up and pounced at a girl beside her. Seeing Gyno pounce, Lisa pushed. A surge of energy burst forth from her palm. Gyno was sent flying. Gyno was dumbfounded. She didn't understand what had happened at all. How could a girl be so scary? Qin Zhao smiled but didn't say anything, even if he could have stopped it just now. Even if he could have stopped her, he didn't. Apart from a Deuce, everyone here could beat Gyno up. Even if it was a Deuce, he still had a bunch of ferocious evil spirit followers. Qin Zhao smiled at Gyno. Stand up. Don't play dead. Gyno stood up slowly. Gyno's eyes flashed. She seemed to want to fight one last time. The people around him looked at Neil with mocking eyes. Gyno felt extremely embarrassed. What exactly do you want? You messed with me first, Qin Zhao said calmly. Gyno looked left and right. Everyone was watching the show. Everyone was watching her make a fool of herself. You're breaking the law, Gyno said after a long while. Everyone roared with laughter. Gyno was embarrassed too. In the past, it was her enemies who said this to her. But today, she was forced to say such words. If Qin Zhao cared, he probably wouldn't have kidnapped her here. Everyone here clearly didn't care about worldly laws. Even the girl who'd sent her flying had a sneer on her face. Just then, Ruan Faxpen walked out. Yo, President, where did you find such an ancient clan? Primordial clan? What ancient family? Qin Zhao asked, confused. To put it bluntly, he's a person of ancient bloodline, Ruan Faxpen said. The most direct way to tell is his green pupils. Everyone looked at Neil's eyes. Sure enough, her eyes were green. The primordial clan originated in ancient Egypt. They were actually a branch of humans, but because they were stronger than ordinary people, they threatened the position of the rulers. In the end, they were slaughtered by ordinary humans. However, among ordinary people, there would occasionally be 1 or 2 people with atavism, Ruan Faxpen said. This was the first time Neil had heard of it. The origin of his special ability. So he's special? Qin Zhao narrowed his eyes at Nur. Compared to ordinary people, of course it's special, Ruan Faxpen said. But to us, they're just SOSO. The primordial clan is our kind. They're not much stronger than us. Their strongest ability is to suppress pain and turn pain into power. In ancient Egypt, they formed a powerful undead army, but they don't have true immortality. They'll still die from fatal injuries. Neil understood. These weren't ordinary people either. President, give her to me, Ruan Faxpen said. You like this type? Ha! I just want to use her for an experiment. After all, the primordial clan is rare. Gurnier shuddered. He looked at Ruan Faxpen's messy hair, face full of stubble, and clothes that were also messy and stained. He looked like one of those perverted scientists in movies and TV dramas. Coincidentally, I want to do an experiment, Qin Zhao said. Give me a copy of the data when it's out. No. I don't want to be a lab rat. I'll agree to whatever you want me to do. I'll be your subordinate. Don't make me an experiment subject. Neil begged. Sorry, I don't need it. Qin Zhao looked at Neil with a smile. Neil pounced at Qin Zhao. She wanted to fight with all her might. But the next moment, a black chain drilled out of the ground and wrapped around Neil. Ruan Faxi pointed with his finger, and Neil was pulled to the ground. Little rat, don't mess around. Qin Zhao was surprised. One of the 4 Pillar Kings of the Roma had used this spell last time too. It seemed to be called Hell's Chain. But that wasn't strange. Ruan Faxi knew a lot of random spells. Just then, Portia called. Hey Portia, what's up? Ms. Alex said that she needs you to go over and sign the contract. The sooner the better. Okay, I got it. Qin Zhao hung up. Glancing at the dragged Neil, he turned to leave. Ruan Faxben held the other end of the chain. Neil was completely restrained and couldn't use any strength. Do you know a human? Ruan Faxben asked. Gurnier's footsteps paused, and his expression changed. Where did you hear that name? So you do. Is she okay now? Ruan Faxben's tone was indifferent. But there was also some nostalgia in his tone. Who are you? Neil asked. But at the next moment Gurnier suddenly felt the chains on his body tighten, and his feet seemed to break free from gravity as he floated up. Holding the chain, Ruan Faxben said indifferently, Keep your voice down. Who exactly are you? Who I am is none of your business. Is a human in Los Angeles? She disappeared. She disappeared 10 years ago. Disappeared? Ruan Faxben narrowed his eyes and turned to look at Neil. How did she disappear? Missing is missing. How would I know how she went missing? You'd better keep your arrogance and rudeness to yourself. Anyone here can kill you. Ruan Faxben's tone was rather cold. Just then, the door beside the corridor opened. Gunil saw a girl in black walk out of the door. Looking through the crack in the door, he saw a few skulls in the room. Helis glanced at Gunil indifferently, and then at Ruan Faxben. You're disturbing me. I'm sorry, Helith. Ruan Faxi was a little respectful towards Helith at first. Helis's gaze fell on Neil. Very good material. Ruan, how about giving her to me? Sorry, she's the president's trophy. He asked me to experiment on her. Chapter 1836. When Gunil faced Helith, he felt a chill down his spine. The girl looked young, but there was a hair-raising, awe-inspiring aura between her brows. Helith had a pitiful expression and licked her lips. What a pity! If only I could turn her into a specimen. You know the ancient family too? Yes, I've met one before, Helith said. Huh! There are very few ancient families now. Where did you meet one? Wydak. Where? How come I've never heard of it? An island in the Atlantic Ocean, Helith said. With that, she turned to leave. After a few steps, she looked back at Gunil. Ruan, can you give her to me after you've finished your research? Gunil's expression was unnatural. Specimen? The girl said she wanted to turn her into a specimen? Go talk to the president. Ruan Faxben left with Gunil. Gunil was terrified. She was brought into a lab. Then the chains on her body were loosened. Don't think about escaping. No one can escape from here, Ruan Faxben said. Plus, you've offended the president. Gunil didn't care. So what if she did? At most, she would die. Of course, it would be best if she didn't die. When did Almond go missing? Ruan Faxben asked again. What's your relationship with a human? A human used to be my student, Ruan Faxben said. Ruan Faxben said. But she left my side 25 years ago, and then there was no trace of her. If I hadn't met you today, I would have almost forgotten that I had such a student. Ruan Faxben looked at Afumen. You're her daughter? Gunil didn't speak. Ruan Faxben waved his hand. Draw some blood. Gunil stared at Ruan with a dark expression. You think I'll cooperate? You should. After all, you can stay alive for Afumen's sake. But if the president does it himself, you might be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. Ruan Faxben glanced at the missing finger on Gunil's right hand. Thinking of Qinzhao, Gunil was shocked. In the end, he picked up the syringe and drew some blood. And some of your skin and flesh. Gunnier was furious, but he could only compromise in the end. When did Avelman go missing? 10 years ago. Gunil watched as Ruan Faxben conducted an experiment that she couldn't understand while talking to her. You weren't an adult then, right? Ruan Faxi asked casually. Gunil's face gradually turned cold. She obviously didn't want to talk more about Afumen. After all, because of her mother's disappearance, she had no one to rely on when she was underage. Her current personality, to a large extent, was formed during those years. In the United States, the government sold everything, including land, islands, and oceans. Of course, It was the same for every country. When Qin Zhao arrived at Alex's law firm, he realized that Alex had called the people from the Land and Resources Bureau over. The Land and Resources Bureau sent a small team of 4 people and a lawyer. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to sell. In fact, Alex and her team had already negotiated the price for Qin Zhao. The people from the Bureau of Land and Resources didn't care why Qin Zhao was buying an ocean, even though Qin Zhao said it was for breeding. But they wouldn't believe him. Anyway, they wouldn't care. But then again, since Qin Zhao was willing to buy 100 square kilometers of ocean, he might be willing to buy even larger ones. The rules of the Bureau of Land and Resources for selling the ocean were that it couldn't be a sea route or the habitat of a single species, especially an endangered species. It couldn't be polluting. If a ship, person, or plane crashed in the ocean, the rescuers or teams had the right to enter the area. Anyway, there were a lot of messy conditions. When these people saw Qin Zhao, they started to brag about the huge economic value of the sea. To them, it wasn't easy to meet an idiot, especially one who had money but nowhere to spend it. So, they really hoped that the idiot would buy more. The sea area of the United States was so large, and most of the sea areas, except for a small number of coastal fisheries, were basically empty and had no economic value. So, if someone was willing to buy, they were obviously willing to sell. Unfortunately, Qin Zhao didn't need such a large area at all. After all, Nanchi Island was only so big. It was at most 10 square kilometers. If the island was to be reclaimed and expanded in the future, it would at most be 20 or 30 square kilometers. It wouldn't be any bigger. Qin Zhao didn't need such a large area. Buying an extra inch would be a waste. Qin Zhao was already willing to buy 100 square kilometers. Actually, 50 square kilometers was enough. So, Qin Zhao wouldn't buy a single cent more. The people from the Bureau of Land and Resources were helpless. They couldn't persuade Qin Zhao. Right now, it wasn't a seller's market, but a buyer's market. If Qin Zhao didn't buy it, they would be in big trouble. Originally, Alex had expected to buy the ocean for 5 million, but in the end, she forcefully lowered it to 2 million. Of course, she would get a cut of the money she saved. Alex kept asking Qin Zhao about it. Why did he want to buy the ocean? But Qin Zhao still wouldn't tell her. Alex was very helpless. She didn't believe that Qin Zhao really had too much money and nowhere to spend it. But she still didn't understand the value of the ocean. Was there some natural mineral deposit in the ocean? Even if there was, Qin Zhao couldn't touch the mineral deposit. That wasn't something Qin Zhao could do. Even if the ocean belonged to Qin Zhao, he couldn't do this business. The mineral deposit business had long been controlled by the various giants. Even the richest man in the world would be beaten up if he got involved in the mineral deposit or energy industry, not to mention Qin Zhao. Every industry had its own rules. For example, in the beer industry, Dashan Beer was now a local giant. If a new person entered the picture, Qin Zhao would also attack. Just like how Dashan Beer had been attacked in the past. But the beer industry was relatively mild. Most of the time, it wouldn't use extreme competition. The energy and mineral industries, on the other hand, were pretty much a bloodbath. Just look at the massacres caused by the big companies in Africa and South America. They even started wars. For example, the Wildcat War. To put it simply, it was a war of energy. Chapter 1837. As soon as Qin Zhao walked out of Alex's law firm, 2 bodyguards in black approached him. Mr. Qin, we were sent by Ali Rodriguez Alexander. She hasn't been feeling well recently. We hope you can take a look at her. With that, one of the bodyguards handed Qin Zhao a check. Sure. Qin Zhao looked at the number on the check and agreed without hesitation. Qin Zhao was indeed very rich now, but capitalists were greedy and insatiable. Ali Rodriguez Alexander gave him a price he couldn't refuse. Qin Zhao went to Ali Rodriguez Alexander's luxurious manor without hesitation. Rydra returned to Ali Rodriguez Alexander's side. The last time Qin Zhao saw her, she was still in prison. Ali Rodriguez Alexander was sitting on the same chair as when they first met. Rydra nodded slightly at Chen Zhao. It was a greeting to Chen Zhao. Mr. Chen, hello? We meet again. Hello, Ms. Alexander. Chen Zhao sat beside Ali Rodriguez Alexander. Are you feeling unwell this time? The last time I woke up after being in a coma for 3 days, I felt that I couldn't sleep. Recently, I needed about 48 hours to fall asleep, and the sleep time was very short. I went to the hospital to see a doctor, and the doctor said that it might be a physiological disorder caused by the hormone drugs used during the coma, or it might be because the toxins are still in the body. At present, the hospital can't give an accurate answer. Ms. Alexander, have you had any episodes recently? Are these the symptoms of ALS you mentioned? I don't think so. Ali Rodriguez Alexander stared at Chen Zhao. She wasn't sure if she had fully recovered. After all, ALS was a disease that was hard to detect and prevent. Once it was discovered, it might be in the middle or late stages. Ali Rodriguez Alexander's current state was also very strange. It didn't matter if she was fine or not. Chen Zhao also wanted to see how Ali Rodriguez Alexander was doing. After all, in order to expel the poison from her body, Chen Zhao had fed her the perfect crystal mixture and injected a bit of immortal power. Chen Zhao wasn't sure what would happen if immortal power entered a normal person's body. Chen Zhao checked Ali Rodriguez Alexander's body. That wisp of immortal power was still in Ali Rodriguez Alexander's body. It hadn't been consumed, but it hadn't strengthened either. Chen Zhao was surprised. He didn't expect the immortal power to still be there. One must know that this trace of immortal energy was as insignificant as a matchstick. But immortal power actually existed in Ali Rodriguez Alexander's body. The immortal power wasn't constantly maintained in Ali Rodriguez Alexander's dantian, but automatically circulated in her body. It was this trace of immortal power that kept Ali Rodriguez Alexander in a state of excitement. It's fine, Chen Zhao said. Since you can't sleep, then sleep less. Don't take any tranquilizers. Your body is fine, so don't worry. Hearing that, Ali Rodriguez Alexander heaved a sigh of relief. Chen Zhao realized that the wisp of immortal power was not ordinary qi. It was more like a key that unlocked a certain switch in Ali Rodriguez Alexander's body. Chen Zhao fell into deep thought. Ali Rodriguez Alexander's potential should have been unlocked by the immortal power. According to current scientific inference, there is some kind of switch in the human body. Once this switch was turned on, one would be able to surpass ordinary people. All the attributes of the body would increase. Chen Zhao thought of Nur, the primordial family. Could the primordial family be the evolved version of humans? If the immortal power in Ali Rodriguez Alexander remained, would she evolve into the primordial family? Mr. Chen, what are you thinking about? Is there something wrong with my body? Sorry, Chen Zhao said. I was distracted. Don't worry, you're very healthy. Even healthier than I expected. Is it really okay? Ali Rodriguez Alexander was still a bit worried. After all, Ali Rodriguez Alexander was already at the age of knowing her destiny. However, her body was uncharacteristically excited, her appetite increased, and her athletic ability increased. If she was a young person, she definitely wouldn't think too much. But now, Ali Rodriguez Alexander was an old woman. She wondered if this was the final radiance of a setting sun. Rydra had also examined Ali Rodriguez Alexander. She also realized that Ali Rodriguez Alexander was a bit too healthy. Thus, she didn't dare to jump to conclusions. That was why she suggested Ali Rodriguez Alexander find Chen Zhao. If there was a doctor in the world that Ali Rodriguez Alexander could trust, it was undoubtedly Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao's answer was the same as Rydra's. Ali Rodriguez heaved a sigh of relief. Now, in Rydra's eyes, Chen Zhao was the most authoritative person. Ali Rodriguez Alexander wanted Chen Zhao to stay for dinner. But Chen Zhao still refused. Ali Rodriguez Alexander walked Chen Zhao to the door. Chen Zhao glanced at the manor and said, "Go somewhere else. This place is good, but the air quality is average." Of course, Qin Zhao was just being perfunctory when he said the air quality was average. What Qin Zhao was really dissatisfied with was the thin spiritual energy here. If Qin Zhao fought with others here, his endurance would decrease by at least half. The air quality here is average? But the greenery here is great. It's relative. You can find a better place. Qin Zhao didn't explain further. If it was a normal client, Qin Zhao wouldn't even bother to say so much. For a normal person, moving was a big deal. But for Ali Rodriguez Alexander, moving was just a matter of a word. Qin Zhao thought of the land that Stephen had bought. That piece of land was really good with feng shui. Mr. Chen, do you have any recommendations? Qin Zhao shook his head with a smile. I'm not good at this, but it's easy to tell if a place has good air quality. Like Mr. Chen's Mingwei Villa? Ali Rodriguez Alexander said, smiling. Your place is really hard to leave. Ali Rodriguez Alexander could clearly feel the obvious difference between her manner and Qin Zhao's Mingwei Villa. Ali Rodriguez Alexander thought that it was because of the environment. The view was wide and the sea breeze blew. The air from the sea was unpolluted. Chapter 1838. As soon as Ellie and Qin Zhao reached the door, they saw a car drive in. An old man in his 50s hurriedly got out. The old man seemed to be in a hurry. His face was full of anxiety. Ms. Alexander, can you give me 3 minutes? Just 3 minutes. Seeing this, Qin Zhao said to Ali Rodriguez Alexander, I'm leaving. Ellie was a bit unhappy with the old man's request, but she still bid farewell to Qin Zhao peacefully. Qin Zhao glanced at the old man, nodded slightly, and turned to leave. The old man seemed to have something to ask of Ellie. When Qin Zhao's car drove out of Ellie's manor, he saw the old man's car drive out too. It seemed like Ellie Rodriguez Alexander had only given him 3 minutes. When Qin Zhao got home, Xian Li and Kalon were huddled together, discussing something. Qin Zhao's face darkened. He hadn't even hugged his daughter properly, and she was already with a pig, right? Qin Zhao eavesdropped on their conversation. They were all talking about the golden apple. Qin Zhao sat beside the two. When do you plan on leaving? Uncle. Xian Li glanced at Qin Zhao. We're still searching for more information about the golden apple. Did you find anything? Nothing. Seems like we really need the Book of Prometheus to unlock the secret of the golden apple. I have high hopes for you. Uncle, aren't you going to stop us from stealing the Book of Prometheus from the British Museum? Oh. Then don't go. Uncle, how can you go back on your word? See? I tried to stop you, but you threw a tantrum. What's there to stop? Qin Zhao shrugged. It's fine as long as you don't kill anyone. It's best if you can limit the impact to something that can be settled with money. Xian Li actually felt embarrassed. After all, Qin Zhao had already said that. He even considered how to clean up after Qin Zhao in the end. Boss, I'll take the afternoon off. Portia walked to Qin Zhao. For what? There's an audition in the afternoon. Mr. Stephen recommended me. All right, you can go. Portia left in a hurry. She had to prepare for the audition. He didn't have anything to do in the afternoon, so he planned to walk around UCLA. However, Xian Li and Kalon probably couldn't handle so many kids by themselves, so Qin Zhao planned to bring them along. Qin Zhao brought a bunch of kids to school and attracted some attention. Qin Zhao brought the kids into Wright's office. They directly occupied Wright's office. Chen, where did you kidnap so many kids? Wright was speechless at Jerlin, who had already climbed onto her desk. Grandma, do you have games on your computer? Jerlin looked at Wright with watery eyes. Wright looked at Qin Zhao helplessly. They're all children I adopted. Qin Zhao shrugged. Just then, KG Sayer walked in. When he saw Qin Zhao, his expression darkened. But when he saw the large group of children, he couldn't help but be stunned. Headmaster. Yes, what is it? The volleyball club needs to buy some equipment, so we hope to get some funds, KG Sayer said. This is the application form. Qin Zhao didn't speak at the side. After KG Sayer left, he finally spoke. Right, I asked you to help me find out about this woman. Have you figured it out yet? KG Sayer's hostility toward Qin Zhao was very obvious. But Qin Zhao didn't even know her. So, Qin Zhao had always been curious about what kind of grudge this woman had against him. It's none of my business. Solve your own problem. Why don't you ask her directly? Wright didn't plan to help at all. Instead, she gloated. Tell me the truth. You really don't know her? Could it be that you slept with her before? Qin Zhao rolled his eyes and glared at Wright. Do you believe that I'll bring them here every day? It's okay. I like kids. You better come a few more days. Clang! Wright's cup on the table hit the ground and shattered. Jerlin stuck out her tongue. Grandma Wright, sorry. It's okay. Wright's face twitched. Crack! Suddenly, Kilo held a bunch of flowers in his hands. Kilo looked at Wright, his face bright red. Wright's jaw dropped as she stared at the flower in Kilo's hand. Sorry. Grandma Wright. I accidentally pulled the flowers out. Kilo wasn't very familiar with controlling his power. It was mainly because he was still growing and his increase in power was very unstable. Sometimes his strength would suddenly increase without rhyme or reason. Wright wanted to cry. That was her favorite daffodil. In the end, Kilo pulled it out directly. Qin Zhao walked over and snatched the daffodil from Kilo's hands, then stuffed it back into the pot. It's okay. Grandma Wright won't blame you. Wright really wanted to roar, but with her temperament, she managed to restrain the anger in her heart. She just stared at Qin Zhao with a murderous gaze. Okay. Looks like Grandma Wright is a little angry. Let's go. Qin Zhao tricked Wright and left with the kids, chuckling. Kalon brought Xianli and the other kids to walk around the school. Qin Zhao carried little Jerlin and little Larissa. Didi also followed beside him. Just then, Lit Grove walked over. Grove. Teacher. Lit Grove was also surprised to see Qin Zhao. What's wrong? You look down? Nothing. Lit Grove shook his head. But judging from his expression, something had clearly happened. Then treat me and the kids to dinner tonight. Smiling, Qin Zhao looked at Little Grove. Lit Grove's face turned purple. Teacher. I'm a bit short on money recently. What's wrong? Isn't your dad a superstar? You're short on money? In Qin Zhao's impression, Lit Grove had always been generous. Plus, he wasn't working in the morgue anymore. He was a real intern. Teacher. If I want to borrow some money, will you lend it to me? Lit Grove asked, his face bright red. How much? Qin Zhao asked, taking out his wallet. $10 million. What? $10 million? What do you need $10 million for? Qin Zhao stared at Lit Grove in shock. Chapter 1839. Lit Grove turned his head. If you can't, then forget it. Tell me first, what do you want $10 million for? Do you owe money? Qin Zhao could afford the $10 million. Also, Lit Grove had performed very well in the past 6 months. If he really needed it, Qin Zhao was willing to lend him money. It's not me who wants it. It's my dad who needs it, Lit Grove said. My father invested in a movie, but now the capital chain is broken. If my father can't come up with the follow-up funds, the project will probably be ruined. This is a check for $10 million. Qin Zhao took out the consultation fee that Ellie Rodriguez Alexander had given him today. $10 million. Little Grove was stunned for a moment. Now the money was in front of him. He didn't dare to reach out to take it. Teacher, I have to return it, Qin Zhao said. While Lit Grove was still in a daze, Qin Zhao stuffed the check into his hands. Can you treat us to dinner now? Teacher. I don't have a single cent with me, except for this check? Forget it. I'll treat you, okay? After calling the kids who were still wandering around in school, Qin Zhao's family went out to eat with Lit Grove. Although Lit Grove had received Qin Zhao's loan of $10 million, Qin Zhao had given him a lot of money. However, he still looked worried. The atmosphere at the dining table was still a little gloomy and preoccupied. Grove, do you not have enough money? Enough, teacher. If it's not enough, just tell me. It's not that. Litgrove shook his head. His expression showed that he had something on his mind. He sighed and said, It's my dad's project. I really don't have much confidence. Are you that pessimistic about your father's film project? Sigh. Dad is too radical this time. Although he is very famous in Hollywood, he hasn't produced any memorable works in the past few years. None of his works have performed well at the box office, so Dad has become very impatient. He is eager to prove himself with this project, so I am very worried that he will fail. Didn't you persuade him? How could he listen to me? Litgrove shook his head with a bitter smile. In his eyes, I'm still that kid who asks him for money every day. Aren't you? Qin Zhao mercilessly exposed Litgrove's true nature. Teacher, I've already restrained myself a lot this year, all right? Your father's project is an independent film. Yes, he's the main character himself. I heard that he received a script after watching Mr. Stevens' last 2 movies. Not only did it succeed in the box office, but it also won the Oscars, Litgrove said helplessly. Anyway, it's a very ambitious work. All right, let the adults handle their own matters. Since your father chose this movie project, he must have his own considerations. After all, he's more professional than you. Chen Zhao could only comfort Ritter Grove with these words. After all, Chen Zhao had been in the film industry before. More or less, he knew some inside information about movies. No company or project could guarantee the success of a movie. Even Steven was known as the king of the box office and the king of directors. But every one of his own movies was treading on thin ice. Even he wasn't confident, let alone others. There were many factors that contributed to a movie's failure. Even the successful movies in history might not succeed. Another director might not be able to do it either. But movies that failed in the box office all had one thing in common: they were ugly. The public didn't like it. Most independent movies had this problem. A movie with a plot that wasn't friendly to ordinary audiences would definitely fail in the box office. So sometimes, professionals might not have more accurate eyes than ordinary audiences. Just like The Cloud Map, from a few years ago. That movie was made by the Wachowski siblings, the directors of The Matrix. It was said to be their most ambitious work. In the end, the box office suffered a huge loss. The plot was very obscure. Ordinary audiences couldn't understand it at all. So, it was natural that it failed. Grove, where did you go this time? Drow Grove sat in the living room, dissatisfaction written all over his face. You're not young anymore. You should learn to be independent and not go out to play every day. I'm at school all day today, Litgrove retorted. Please don't vent your unhappiness at work on me. I'm your father. Drow Grove's voice suddenly rose. Indeed, everything had been going wrong for him recently. He had run into a wall everywhere he looked for investments. This made him suppress an unknown anger in his heart that he had nowhere to vent. Litgrove took out the check. Here's $10 million. Stunned, Drow Grove took the check and looked at it. Where did you get it? I borrowed it, Litgrove replied. Borrowed? Where did you get it? Did you find a loan shark? No, I didn't. I borrowed it from a friend. Don't worry about the interest. Just pay the bank interest when you pay it back. Show me the loan contract, Drow Grove said seriously. If he didn't know where the check came from, he wouldn't dare to use it. Even though Litgrove had made it clear. He was still worried that Litgrove would be cheated. Some loans seemed harmless on the surface but actually hid deep traps. There's no loan contract, Litgrove said. My relationship with him doesn't need a loan contract. How is that possible? If there's no loan contract, how can your friend be sure that you'll pay it back? Anyway, don't worry. No, you have to tell me who you borrowed the money from. It's my teacher, a university teacher, Litgrove said. A university teacher? A university teacher is that rich? No, he's just an exception. Anyway, he's very rich. Are you sure he's fine? I'm not a child, Litgrove said. Drowgrove's eyes flickered. If there was no loan contract. Dad, don't mess around. My teacher has a huge network and he's very rich. If you don't pay him back, he'll make sure you can't survive in Hollywood. I'm a Hollywood A-lister. No one can make me lose my career. Can Mr. Stephen do that? He can, but I don't have any conflicts with him. Chapter 1840. He can get Mr. Stephen to ban you. Trust me, as long as he asks, Mr. Stephen will make you disappear from Hollywood forever. Your teacher knows Mr. Stephen? Not only do they know each other, he and Mr. Stephen are best friends. They invested in the movie Kidnapped, which is currently airing. Littlegrove shook his head. Plus, his assets are in the tens of billions. He can kill you with money. Drowgrove inhaled sharply. He did not know that his son's teacher had such a powerful background. He glanced at the check in his hand. 10 million was tempting, but it wasn't worth risking his life. A super-rich man was terrifying. Neither he nor his son could fight against him. Son, when are you going to introduce me to your teacher? Forget it. My teacher doesn't like to have anything to do with you. Drowgrove was rather disappointed. If only he'd known that his son knew such a super-rich man. He would have gotten to know him earlier. After Kalon said goodbye, Qin Zhao immediately pulled Xianli to his side. Xianli, I'm not against you dating, but my request is that you're not allowed to sleep with any man before you turn 18. Uncle! Xianli looked at Qin Zhao, her face bright red. Okay, I know what you want to say. That's my request. Qin Zhao shrugged. You can leave now. Xianli stomped away. Qin Zhao added from behind. Oh, I know what you want to say. By the way, if I find out that someone had sex with you, I will crush that man's organs, no matter who that man is. Xianli was already furious. She ran away, her face bright red. You can't take a joke, Qin Zhao said, chuckling. Fei Lai placed a plate of cut fruits before Qin Zhao. Are you joking with Xianli? No, I'm serious. Don't you think it's too early for Xianli to talk about this? Don't you think it'll be too late when it happens? Just then, the deer strolled over and started eating the fruits on Qin Zhao's plate. It had been 2 weeks since the deer came home. It had gradually familiarized itself with the environment. It was no longer afraid of everything in Ninghua Villa like before. Qin Zhao waved his hand and the deer strolled toward him. It liked to be touched and enjoyed it very much. Qin Zhao stroked the deer, feeling the trace of immortal power in its body. This was what Qin Zhao had sent into its body. Just like Ellie Rodriguez Alexander, the immortal power in its body was also preserved. And it was moving all over his body. Compared to the first time it came here, the deer was much stronger. At that time it was suffering from disease. Qin Zhao silently checked the deer's condition. He also discovered that the immortal power in the deer's body seemed to have grown stronger. Qin Zhao was surprised. Why was the immortal power in the deer so strong? This situation didn't seem to happen to Ellie Rodriguez Alexander. Qin Zhao didn't understand why this had happened. Why was the immortal energy in Little Deer's body so strong? There should be no reason for this to happen, right? Although the immortal power was in Little Deer's body, Little Deer didn't know how to circulate it. Why was it growing stronger in its body? And why didn't this happen to Ellie Rodriguez Alexander? What was the difference between the two? Qin Zhao fell into deep thought. Qin Zhao suddenly thought of a possibility. Animals could demonize, but humans couldn't. Transvestites didn't count. Was it possible that Little Deer was also demonizing? But Ellie Rodriguez Alexander definitely wouldn't become a monster or a deity because of a trace of immortal power. If Qin Zhao guessed, what would Little Deer become in the end? This made Qin Zhao even more curious. Would it really demonize? Qin Zhao looked at his hands. The power of yin and yang flowed between his palms. Then he carefully sent it into Little Deer's body. The deer suddenly fell to the ground with a thud, its body stiff. Oh no! Chen Zhao hurriedly picked up Little Deer. He couldn't be dead, right? Chen Zhao immediately checked Little Deer's body. Little Deer's heart was still beating, but the power of yin and yang was creating conflict. Originally, there were two distinct powers in Chen Zhao's body. But in Little Deer's body, there were side effects. The power of yin was cosmic rays. It was chaotic and hard to control. Right now, it was continuously destroying Little Deer's body. The power of yang was pure immortal power. It was full of vitality. It kept repairing Little Deer's damaged body. It was the two powers that made Little Deer lose its ability to move and even its consciousness. Chen Zhao hurriedly guided the two powers. Originally, the two powers coexisted harmoniously in Chen Zhao's body in the form of a yin-yang fish, forming a stable state. But Little Deer didn't know how to control the power of yin and yang. So, Chen Zhao had to control it. However, these two forces were too weak. They weren't enough to form a yin-yang fish. Chen Zhao couldn't send in more power. After all, Little Deer's body was also weak. It couldn't handle more power. Chen Zhao slowly controlled the two powers so that they wouldn't run amok. No, once they left Chen Zhao's control, the two powers would run amok again. Should he just let them run amok? Chen Zhao hesitated. Or should he just take back the two powers? Chen Zhao couldn't think of a solution no matter how hard he thought. He could only take back the power of yin and yang. If he allowed the two powers to continue running amok, logically, the power of yin and yang should counter each other. But destroying was much easier than recovering. The power of yin could easily wreak havoc in Little Deer's body. But the power of yang couldn't repair Little Deer's body so quickly. So, if this situation continued, Little Deer would definitely die. Chen Zhao didn't want Little Deer to die yet, so he could only take back the power. Chen Zhao left a bit more celestial power in it, and fused it with the previous strand of celestial power. Soon, the immortal power started repairing Little Deer's body. But Little Deer fell into a deep sleep. Chen Zhao couldn't continue experimenting on Little Deer now. He could only put it in his nest first. The power of yin and yang that he just distributed shouldn't be 50% each. According to the situation, yin and yang should be 25% and 75%. That way, when the power of yin destroyed Little Deer, yang could keep up with the recovery speed. But Chen Zhao himself was a perfect 55. This was because his body was strong enough. It wouldn't be destroyed or killed by the power of yin. Chapter 1841. Chen Zhao looked around and saw Princess. Chen Zhao hesitated again. Because of that accident, Princess had been fed a demonic potion by Chen Zhao and turned into a hybrid demon. But other than the change in size, Princess didn't change much. Chen Zhao wanted test subjects now. The requirement was that the test subjects couldn't have their own energy. For example, Black Ma, White Ma, Beelzebub, Raymond, Carrie, King Kong, Abitos, and Aman weren't suitable. They all had magic power that would conflict with Chen Zhao's immortal power. Secondly, they needed a strong body. In this aspect, Princess was the strongest among all the pets. She was also the pet that could support Chen Zhao's power. Princess, come here! Princess immediately ran to Chen Zhao with her short, thick limbs. Princess was the closest to Chen Zhao. She was different from the deer. To Chen Zhao, the deer was just a test subject. It could even be used as dog food at any time. Chen Zhao didn't feel burdened at all. But Princess was like a family member. In other words, they had feelings for each other. So, Chen Zhao couldn't test it like he did with the deer. After experimenting on the deer, Chen Zhao had some experience and was more confident, so he decided to try it on Princess. Chen Zhao sent strands of yin and yang energy into Princess's body according to the ratio of 25% and 75%. The princess immediately sensed this energy with her keen senses. After it was sent into Princess's body, it rampaged around just like how it had been in the deer's body. However, Princess's body was many times stronger than the deer's. Because of the difference in ratio, the damage and recovery were basically the same for Princess. So, Princess didn't feel pain. She even felt comfortable. Qin Zhao realized that Princess's body seemed to have grown bigger. Moreover, the Princess's muscles had also tightened. But because of her fur, her muscles weren't obvious. Princess's front paws slammed on the ground, creating a crack. Qin Zhao was surprised. The crack wasn't caused by pure power. It was more like some special power. Princess should be able to accept more yin and yang energy, Qin Zhao thought. At the same time, he sent a strand of yin and yang energy. Just then, Princess's growth became even more obvious. Princess's weight was already 2,000 kilograms. At this moment, its physique had grown tremendously. Qin Zhao took out an electronic scale. It was specially modified from a cow's scale. It could even weigh a few thousand kilograms of weight. Princess stepped onto the electronic scale. A number immediately appeared on the electronic scale, 2,878 kilograms. Qin Zhao exclaimed. The princess's growth was too obvious. Just like that, he gained about 800 kilograms out of nowhere. Princess, do you have any special abilities? The princess howled twice. There is? Ow. The princess nodded. Can I use it here? Ow. The princess shook her head. Then let's go to the courtyard. Qin Zhao and the princess stood face to face. Use it on me. Tilting her head, Princess looked at him hesitantly. Princess never attacked him. This was the loyalty of the princess. It didn't understand why Qin Zhao wanted it to attack it. Although the princess was very smart, there were some requests that conflicted with her principles, so her brain couldn't function properly. Forget it. Attack that tree. Qin Zhao pointed at a dwarf tree in the yard. Qin Zhao had spent tens of thousands of dollars to transplant this tree. Of course, it wasn't an expensive plant. It was just beautiful. Princess didn't have much sympathy for this dwarf tree. She slammed her claws on the ground. Hiss, a tearing sound spread out. Immediately, Qin Zhao felt a wave of power being released along the sound. The power that Princess released was channeled through the ground. However, it didn't spread out like lightning. Instead, it formed a straight line. Crack! The dwarf fir tree several meters away suddenly split in half. It was as if Princess was born to use this power. The new power she'd obtained was different from Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao had also obtained an unfamiliar power before. But after he obtained it, he didn't know how to use it at first. He had to explore and practice on his own to slowly familiarize himself with it. But Princess did it directly. Of course, this was probably because of her animal nature. But Qin Zhao was more curious about the mechanism by which Princess obtained this power. It wasn't the mechanism itself, but the process of obtaining the power. How was it triggered? Beelzebub had once said that after demonization, creatures had a certain chance of obtaining special abilities. But Princess had never obtained special abilities before. So this didn't count as awakening a special ability? If this was a special ability after demonization, then, in other words, after the princess demonized, she already had this ability. Now, after using the yin and yang energy, this ability was revealed. It wasn't hard to confirm the mechanism of obtaining this ability. Walter and White Snow were also half-demons. After experimenting on Princess, Qin Zhao was even more familiar with it. So, Qin Zhao was confident that he could complete the experiment, while ensuring Walter and White Snow's safety. Qin Zhao called White Snow to his side first. The entire process was like Princess. However, White Snow's body was far from Princess. It could only withstand 1/5 of Princess energy at most. Qin Zhao sent the yin and yang energy into White Snow's body. White Snow's body shook violently. Then, it split into 2 and became 2 Snowies. Then 2 became 4. Qin Zhao looked at White Snow's transformation in surprise. Doppelganger? Was this its special ability? Qin Zhao did the same experiment on Walter's body. Qin Zhao realized that Walter could actually teleport. But it wasn't the kind where he could appear a dozen or dozens of meters in a flash. His body flickered very slightly, perhaps only a meter away. But the frequency was very fast. Qin Zhao had encountered enemies who could flash before. But he'd never seen someone flash so frequently. If one didn't observe closely, one would only think that Walter was running fast and not teleporting. Was this evolution? Qin Zhao didn't know whether it was evolution or mutation. Walter, the princess, and Snow White were all born with knowledge. It seemed like they didn't need to practice or others to teach them. They already knew and mastered their special abilities. Oh, the 5 tiger generals and dolphins family seemed to be able to undergo the same enhancement. Qin Zhao didn't care how much celestial power he had to pay. It wouldn't cost much in the first place. Plus, with so much celestial power, it would only take a few days of cultivation. Qin Zhao wanted to see what special abilities the 5 tiger generals and dolphins family would obtain. Chapter 1842. But Qin Zhao still hesitated. Because they weren't half demons. The 5 tiger generals and the dolphin family weren't demons. Back then, Qin Zhao had turned Princess and Snow White into half demons. Because they'd been on the verge of death. Demonization was an irreversible process. Plus, it wasn't completely safe every time. So, after thinking for a long time, Qin Zhao gave up on the idea. At night, Qin Zhao rose to an altitude of 50,000 meters again. Qin Zhao tried to fly higher, but he still couldn't escape the restraints of oxygen. Qin Zhao could absorb the oxygen in the small world, but once he reached a vacuum environment, the oxygen in the small world would completely disappear. Qin Zhao couldn't absorb it even if he wanted to. By then, he would have to hold his breath. 50,000 meters was a relatively easy altitude. He couldn't go any higher. Plus, the higher the altitude, the stronger the cosmic rays. Qin Zhao didn't need that much strength right now. This had basically become a daily routine for Qin Zhao. But he couldn't absorb cosmic rays endlessly. Qin Zhao needed to maintain a balance between yin and yang. The amount of celestial power he absorbed was the same amount of cosmic rays. As Qin Zhao absorbed more and more cosmic rays, his body was almost covered in a layer of high-energy light. Qin Zhao's body was almost covered in a layer of high-energy light, like a ball of light. Suddenly, Qin Zhao sensed something. He raised his head and looked up. Space station? Did the space station find him? At the same time, the astronauts in the space station were reporting to the ground. ISS Alpha, it is now 1:23 a.m. New York time. We are 30,000 meters above the Pacific Ocean at coordinates 33. 1555 E, 118. 72004N, and we have discovered a high-energy light source. We are unable to determine the specific origin of the object. The object has strong cosmic radiation. Just then, the headquarters of many stations on the ground received this information. Because the location was above American territorial waters, NASA naturally reported this to the Department of Defense. Apart from space shuttles, the only plane that could fly at this altitude was the Night Owl. The Night Owl B-1 was also the highest plane in the world. It was a combination of fighter and bomber. It could reach a height of 60,000 meters and a top speed of Mach 2. 5. After receiving the order from the Air Force of the Department of Defense, a Night Owl flew toward the sea. Malone Williamston and the co-pilot Heckmansprin were nervous. After all, they were facing an unknown. Even the instructions given to them by the Air Force Command were vague. Soon, they discovered a high-energy light source in the distance. This is Nightingale B-1, serial number S21. We have arrived above the area where the incident occurred. We can see the high-energy light source with the naked eye. Air Force Command, please issue an order. I repeat, can you communicate with the other party through radio waves? I've tried to communicate with him, but he didn't respond. Launch a Stinger missile at this object. Please repeat, do you want us to attack the object? Yes, you heard me right. Attack the object. This was the habit of the Americans. They would always launch probing attacks on unknown objects in the sky above their territory. This was mainly because after September 11th, the United States was overly nervous about its territorial security. Even if it was a commercial airliner, once it deviated from its course, it would be regarded as a threat and shot down. Target locked. Please confirm the missile strike command again. Attack. Malone and Hemmons-Prin looked at each other and exchanged glances. Malone activated the missile lock-on system. Fire 2 Stinger L-12s. Suddenly, Chen Zhao felt Nightingale and the missile flying toward him. Fuck. Chen Zhao cursed and moved instantly. This wasn't an RGP missile. Stinger L-12 was an airborne missile. The Stinger L-12's speed reached Mach 5. Most aircrafts couldn't avoid the Stinger L-12's pursuit. Chen Zhao realized that the two missiles were moving extremely fast. He suddenly lowered his altitude and exploded with speed. However, the two missiles were still locked onto Chen Zhao. Serial number S21. Report the strike result. Stinger L-12 is tracking the target. It hasn't hit the target yet. The target moves very fast and is very strong in the air. The two missiles were almost at the same speed as him. However, Chen Zhao didn't plan on destroying the two missiles. Instead, he played hide-and-seek with them. There were very few people who could compete with him in this game of speed. Chen Zhao kept performing various actions in the air. It wasn't just the two missiles. Even the plane was tracking him. Chen Zhao had an idea. He suddenly did a backflip in the air and flew toward the Nightingale. Oh no! That object is coming toward us. Dodge, dodge. The two missiles tailed Chen Zhao and flew toward the Nightingale. Immediately, the two pilots shot out from the cockpit. Boom, boom. With two huge explosions, the Nightingale turned into a fireball and fell from the sky. Seeing that his toys were gone, Chen Zhao dove into the sea. A thought suddenly popped up in his mind. Maybe he could find a group of American airmen to play with every day. He looked up at the two parachutes slowly falling from the sky. God bless those two unlucky pilots. Chen Zhao muttered to himself, gloating. Chen Zhao gloated to himself and left via the waterway. In the water, he was even faster than on land and in the sky. Not only did the seawater not obstruct him, it even pushed him to the highest speed. Moreover, the seawater could block the surveillance of the satellites in the sky. Chen Zhao didn't care how much of an impact he'd caused today. It had nothing to do with him anyway. Right now, both the International Space Station and the American Air Force were in an uproar. To Chen Zhao, being captured by the International Space Station was an accident. He really wanted to shoot down all the satellites in the sky, but he knew that it was impossible. Even the lowest low Earth orbit satellite was hundreds of kilometers from the ground. There were even higher ones, such as the International Space Station. At its lowest, it was more than 300 kilometers from the ground. For now, Chen Zhao couldn't fly that high. But he believed that one day, he would be able to use his body to challenge extreme heights. As for traveling in the sky, it could only stay in Chen Zhao's mind for now. He'd gone too far just now. It was probably 2,000 kilometers from the shore. Chen Zhao silently returned to Minghui Villa. Suddenly, he saw a cruise stop on the sea. Chen Zhao was a bit surprised. Why would the cruise stop at such a remote place? 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 1843. The ship definitely wouldn't stop in the deep waters before reaching the port. This was because it was a very dangerous thing to do. The size of the cruise ship was too big. It could be knocked over by the waves when it stopped. A ship could have 3,000 to 4,000 people, including the crew. They could face this danger at any time. So, the ship would only stop at the port. The waves at the port would definitely be small. Moreover, there were ropes to secure the ship and protect it. Because of this, Chen Zhao stopped to observe the ship. It wasn't that Chen Zhao was a professional. It was just that when he bought the ship, the professionals had told him about this. Just then, a small boat approached the ship. Chen Zhao was in the water, but he could still see the people climbing up from the boat. He knew a few of them. They were from the psionic team. The Blue Giant, the cruise ship, was 368 meters long and 55 meters wide, with a capacity of 4,500 passengers. But right now, the ship was suffering from a disaster. Shh! Don't make a sound! A man forcefully covered the mouth of a woman whose face was full of tears. The two of them were hiding in a narrow cabin. The man was also very nervous and terrified. The small cabin was filled with a terrifying atmosphere. I'll let go of your mouth now. Don't make a sound, understand? The woman nodded slightly. Jack let go of the woman's mouth. She didn't make a sound. The two hid in the cabin in fear. Occasionally, the sound of heavy objects colliding could be heard from the cabin's metal door. The woman held a silver cross in her hand. She mumbled something as if she was praying. Jack glanced at her. Are you a tourist? The woman nodded and glanced at Jack. He was wearing a sailor suit. It seemed that he was a crew member. I'm Jack. What's your name? Maeve. Do you have a communicator or something? Jack asked. Maeve took out her phone. Yes, but there's no signal. Jack's face was filled with disappointment. Maeve trembled. What was that? I don't know. I don't know. Jack shook his head. Just 2 hours ago, the Blue Giant was suddenly attacked by unknown creatures. There were many of them, and they were cruel and bloodthirsty. They even started a massacre on the ship. They were like demons that had crawled out of hell, wantonly slaughtering defenseless humans. Suddenly, a horrifying and distorted black face peered through the window. Jack and Maeve's scalps were about to explode. They all hid under the door, not daring to make the slightest sound. The demon didn't notice Jack and Maeve right under his nose. After a few more glances, he turned around and left. At this time, 2 voices came from outside. It was a language they had never heard before. At this moment, the silver cross in Maeve's hand suddenly felt a burning sensation. Maeve immediately covered her mouth, her other hand holding the cross tightly. She was afraid that she would cry out in pain, but at the same time, she did not dare to throw the cross away. This small cross seemed to be her only support. Jack stood up carefully and glanced outside. At this moment, the face that should have left reappeared. Jack met Jonah's eyes. Then, a claw pierced through the hatch in Jack's chest. Maeve covered her mouth, her face full of fear and panic. He curled up in a corner, not daring to make a sound. Jack's body was trembling. But from beginning to end, he did not look at Maeve. This might be his last responsibility as a man. His heart was pulled out by the demon, and his body slowly fell to the ground. The demon outside scratched the hatch with its claws. Maeve's body was already stiff. The hatch was directly cut open, and Maeve finally saw the full appearance of the demon who killed Jack. The demon's skin was dark, with a pair of protruding horns on his head, red pupils, and pointed ears. However, the most impressive thing about him was his hands. All 10 of his fingers were long and slender claws. His left hand was also holding a heart, Jack's heart. The demon licked his lips, took a deep breath with his hooked nose, and then began to look around the cabin. Maeve found that the demon did not seem to see her. His eyes swept over her body, but did not linger on her body. This made Maeve very surprised. Why is this? Could it be because of this cross pendant of hers? The demon's mouth made strange syllables. At this moment, the wind suddenly rose in the cabin. Maeve subconsciously shrank, and there was a subtle sound of friction under her feet. The demon's pupils shrank, and he suddenly looked at Maeve's position. But he still could not see Maeve. He smelled the scent of a second person in the cabin. He also heard the sound just now. The demon tilted his head and kept looking at the corner, at Maeve's position. The demon began to walk in Maeve's direction, and then reached out. Maeve was so frightened that she threw the cross directly at the demon. In an instant, Maeve's figure was revealed. And the cross hit the demon's face. Ah! The demon let out an unbearable howl of pain. The cross was like a branding iron, leaving a cross mark directly on his face. Maeve took the opportunity to quickly crawl out of the cabin with her limbs. The desire to survive made her extremely fast. But after a few steps, she saw the corpses lying on the ground. The demon had come out of the cabin, his face full of rage. The cross mark on his face was very obvious. Run, keep running. The demon licked his lips. The demon's human language was not very smooth. But Maeve could understand it. The demon's face was full of mockery. He wanted to talk about being a mouse. Maeve suddenly turned and rushed around the corner. The next moment, Maeve suddenly grabbed the cross. Stealth, stealth. Stealth. The demon came to the corner, and did not see her. The demon strolled past in front of Maeve. But after 2 steps, he stopped and turned to look at Maeve, a cruel smile on his face. Maeve's face was extremely pale. She did not know if she was invisible or not. Your smell, you deceived my eyes, but you can't deceive my nose. The demon came in front of Maeve again. Maeve could smell the disgusting stench of the demon. The demon opened his mouth, revealing a mouth full of fangs. His breath was so close. Maeve gripped the cross tightly. Give him another one? Should I give him again? Suddenly, the demon's movement stopped, and he froze in place. Slowly, the demon's body leaned forward and fell in front of Maeve. Maeve shrank back in fear and looked down. There was an arrow in the back of the demon's head. Maeve looked in the other direction of the aisle in shock. She saw a hooded woman standing at the end of the aisle, holding a small crossbow in her hand. Chapter 1844. Maeve collapsed to the ground. The hooded woman walked over and looked down at Maeve. Just then, a few more people came from the other side of the aisle. Brits looked at Maeve and stretched out his hand. Can you stand up? Maeve slowed down and looked at the people in front of her with a pale face. Who are you? Brits helped Maeve up. Someone who specializes in this kind of problem. Maeve suddenly broke down. Why did this happen? Why? For Maeve, what happened here was like a nightmare. Clatter, clatter. Just then, there was a dense sound from the front of the aisle. Then, a demon with a wooden staff appeared at the corner of the aisle. The demon was wearing a tattered robe and was extremely skinny, not even as strong as an ordinary person. There was only one eye on his face, no nose, and no teeth in his mouth. He made strange syllables. He was surrounded by very small demons. Those little demons were only the size of a fist, and their bodies were like balls, with only a mouth full of fangs and short limbs. These little demons were very good at climbing. They could climb onto walls or ceilings. And their movements were very fast and agile. The skinny demon pointed his wooden staff at the crowd. The group of little demons suddenly charged at the crowd. Burner of the wilderness, reveal your true form. Sam Mira quickly used ancient god magic, and a fiery ethereal blocked in front of the crowd. The little demons pounced at the fiery ethereal, but before they could get close, they were blocked by the scorching heat and were easily roasted to the ground. The fiery ethereal closed in on the skinny demon. The skinny demon pointed his wooden staff at the ethereal, but before he could release magic, the staff had already been ignited. The temperature around the ethereal was very high. Let's go. We'll follow behind, Sam Mira said. With the ethereal leading the way, the whole process was very smooth. Occasionally, demons that popped up from a corner were instantly burned to ashes. Maeve was completely shocked. There was actually such a supernatural thing in this world. Demon! Magic! So weak! As soon as Sam Mira finished speaking, the ethereal was suddenly smashed by a figure that suddenly rushed out. It was a muscular monster, a tall demon. This demon's body wasn't very large, it could only be said to be sturdy. He was 2 meters tall and his head was 2 to 3 times the size of a normal person. He had a pair of bull horns on his forehead. It had almost no neck, and below its head was its shoulders. Its skin was bright red, and its body was so strong that it looked like hundreds of muscles were piled together. Hee hee! The muscular devil let out a strange laugh. Roar! The tank roared and rushed towards the muscular demon. Ping! The arms of the tank and the muscular devil pushed against each other as they wrestled with each other. Tank's body was no smaller than this muscular demon, and his strength was similar. However, everyone had calm expressions on their faces because they were able to match this muscular demon without even transforming into a tank. Therefore, in their opinion, the tank would definitely win. The muscular demon suddenly let out a painful howl. Both of his arms were broken by the tank. Tank headbutted the muscular devil on the head. The muscular devil instantly lost the ability to resist and fell to the ground. However, the next moment, more muscular demons appeared in front of them. Countless, densely packed, muscular devils. Tank roared again. His body suddenly grew, reaching a height of 3 meters. Violent crushing. The tank charged forward in a berserk manner. He ran from the original spot to the end of the corridor. The muscular devils along the way were all crushed by the tank. Maeve looked at the tank in shock. Was he still human? She had thought that it would be a tough battle. However, she didn't expect the tank to be this strong. Nearly 100 muscular devils were crushed in an instant. So strong! Maeve looked at Tank's stalwart back in shock. Sam Mira shook his head, his expression not relaxing at all. Not enough, not strong enough. Not enough, far from enough. Tank said the same thing. In the past, once Tank transformed, he would lose the ability to speak. He would completely lose his mind and become a crazy killing machine. But now, he could still maintain his mind after transforming. The hooded woman glanced at everyone, confusion written all over her face. She was a newcomer to the psionic team. She didn't understand everyone's mentality. Mira, is it just my imagination? Ever since the first day I joined your team, you've been in a very strange state. Everyone's been training like crazy and accepting all kinds of missions. Is this the tradition of the psionic team? Because we have an enemy we must defeat, an extremely powerful one. Sam Mira said calmly. Sam Mira said faintly. Angelaise, as long as you stay in our team, you'll have to face him one day. I've never feared any enemy, Angelaise said calmly, but her eyes were filled with determination. The group continued forward, their expressions extremely serious. I feel a great evil on the left, Brit said. Then let's go that way. I hope it'll give us a greater challenge. Devils continued to appear along the way. There were mainly 3 types. One was the one Maeve had encountered at the beginning. Their claws were long and sharp, and they had powerful cutting abilities. They also moved quickly. The other 2 types were the withered devil and the muscular devil. The withered devil was a pure magic type, while the muscular devil was a pure physical type. They were 2 extremes. None of the 3 types could cause any trouble for the psionic team. The journey was very smooth. The performance hall is up ahead, Maeve said. There was originally going to be a staged performance there tonight. Half of the ship's people were in that hall. Tank directly pushed open the door to the performance hall. In an instant, an extremely pungent stench assaulted everyone's noses. Everyone couldn't help but cover their noses. As soon as they stepped into the performance hall, everyone was shocked. This was a feast of blood and flesh. Inside the large and spacious performance hall, there were hundreds of small devils. Their skin was dry and red, and they were crazily feasting on the flesh and blood on the ground. 4 demons stood on the stage, and they were clearly different from the other demons. Not only in their forms, but also in their pressuring auras. Chapter 1845. A demon sat in the center of the stage. He was astonishingly large, at least 5 meters tall. His skin was dark red, and a pair of canine teeth protruded from his chin. Even sitting on the ground, he was still taller than the other 3 demons. The male demon was around 2 meters tall, with a pair of demon wings on his back. His eyes were completely black, and his skin was also dark gray. Beside him was a great sword that was even taller than him. The other 2 demons were female. One had an enchanting figure, and her clothes were even more revealing. Only her breasts and lower body were covered. This female demon's figure was almost the same as a normal woman's, but more seductive. She had a pair of small demon horns on her head, and held a leather whip in her hand. There was also a female demon with long hair, and her face couldn't be seen clearly. She wore a white robe, and looked like Sadako. However, her arms were a bit too long, and they were almost touching the ground. A few more bugs? The huge demon looked at the group of uninvited guests. I like that one. The seductive demon pointed at Tank. I can feel the power in his body. How fascinating. Maeve was already trembling in fear. The atmosphere here was completely different from before. She could even feel the nervousness of the people around her. Even they could feel the tension. That meant the situation here wasn't optimistic. The demon with one hand on the great sword looked at the crowd. My children, go enjoy fresh meat. The big-headed demons turned to look at the crowd, and terrifying sounds came from their mouths. There were probably close to 1,000 big-headed demons in the performance hall. Every big-headed demon's eyes emitted a cruel and bloodthirsty light. Maeve subconsciously hid at the back of the crowd. Go! The great sword demon ordered. In an instant, all the big demons charged at the crowd. Angelaise spread her arms like a swan goose, and at the same time, performed a beautiful somersault in the air. While in the air, the crossbow in her hand instantly fired a series of arrows. Swish, swish, swish. Angelaise might not be the strongest, but her killing efficiency was definitely the highest. In an instant, 6 big-headed demons were shot in the eye sockets, and they were instantly killed. Tank's crushing killing method wasn't as effective as before. These big-headed demons seemed to be very resistant to force, and their bodies were very soft and elastic. Tank threw a punch with all his might, but it only bounced off the big-headed demon. It didn't pose a fatal threat. The scene was in chaos, and no one cared about Maeve's safety anymore. No one had the time to go out of their way to protect Maeve. Maeve had never been part of their plan. Suddenly, a big-headed demon lunged at Maeve. Maeve fell to the ground in fright. She could do nothing but cover her head. Puff! Maeve heard a strange, muffled sound. She waited a few seconds, but didn't feel any pain. Maeve glanced around and found that there was another person beside her. It was an Asian man. The man glanced at her, then pulled a chair over and sat down. He crossed his legs as if he was enjoying a performance. Who are you? To watch the show, Chen Zhao answered. These demons reminded him of the demons from Bermuda. If it really was a demon from Bermuda, then the frequency of their activities was really high. Moreover, this was probably not the first or second time he had created such a tragedy. Maeve also kept her distance from Chen Zhao. The man's arrival was too sudden. Moreover, he seemed to have an uninvolved attitude. He didn't look like he was going to help the psionic team at all. Angelaise, Sam Mira, Brits, and Tank were all very powerful. There were many big-headed demons, but they could only cause some trouble for them. Apart from draining their magic power, they didn't have any other effect. Enough. Leave. The Great Sword Fiend was a terror fiend, and these big-headed fiends were his subordinates. He didn't want all his subordinates to die. Angelaise, Sam Mira, Brits, and Tank didn't notice Chen Zhao's arrival. Instead, the 4 demons in the center of the stage noticed him. The 4 people from the psionic team noticed the 4 demons' gazes. They couldn't help but turn toward the door. Instantly, hostility filled the air. Only Angelaise looked at Chen Zhao, confused. She didn't know him at all. What are you doing here? Brits's tone was filled with hostility and wariness. You guys better focus on the 4 demons, Chen Zhao said calmly. They don't look easy to deal with. Who is he? Angelaise asked, confused. Hey miss, don't you know me? I'm your enemy. Of course, I won't do anything before you attack, but I won't save you when you're in danger either. You can treat me as a spectator now. Just then, the terror demon suddenly spread its wings and slashed down at Chen Zhao's head with its giant sword. Chen Zhao clamped the sword between 2 fingers, making it hard for the demon to move. Do you know Patton? The demon's pupils constricted. Chen Zhao saw its gaze. Looks like I know him. Chen Zhao loosened his fingers and the demon took 2 steps back. They're your enemies. At least, I won't do anything before you kill them. Qin Zhao wouldn't be kind enough to help them share the danger. Qin Zhao wanted all 4 of them to die. Suddenly, Britz launched a sneak attack at the demon with its back to him. The demon flapped its wings and blocked Britz's sneak attack. Tank! Don't hold back. Go all out, Britz warned. Tank exploded with 100% rage. In an instant, he turned into a 5-meter giant. He charged at the demon with all his might. The demon's expression changed slightly, and it slashed at Tank with its giant sword. But when the sword hit Tank's fist, not only did it not cut through Tank's fist, but it was deflected by Tank's fist energy instead. Tank roared and pounced, pinning the demon to the ground. One punch, another punch, and another punch. Tank attacked like crazy. Each of his punches carried a destructive power. He looks much stronger than last time, Qin Zhao thought. Seeing that it couldn't beat Tank, the demon immediately called for help. Hurry and save me. Just then, Angelace, Britz, and Sam Mira each chose an opponent. They left the demon to Tank. Tank had become stronger, but his fighting style hadn't changed at all. It was still full of violence and madness. Chapter 1846. Britz was facing the demon that looked like Sadako alone. The white-clothed demon's figure was erratic. Once she moved, she slithered around like a snake. It was hard for Britz to catch her figure. It was as if she had no bones under her white clothes. Every time Britz shot a spell, it was about to hit. But the white-clothed demon could always twist into an unimaginable shape and avoid Britz's spells. Nevertheless, the white-clothed demon couldn't get close to Britz either. The two were in a strange stalemate. Or perhaps neither was using their full strength. On the other hand, Angelace and Sam Mira were working together to fight against the bewitching whip demon. The whip in the leather demon's hand waved in an impenetrable manner. When the whip landed on the ground, it tore a ghastly crack in the ground. Angelace and Sam Mira didn't dare to touch the whip at all. If they touched it, their skin and flesh would be cut off. Angelace's bow and crossbow seemed to be a part of her. Any movement, any angle, could make a shooting motion. Moreover, every arrow was extremely accurate. Even the whip demon often had to rely on the whip to defend and block the crossbow bolts. Sam Mira summoned the blood spirit. The large amount of flesh here made her spell extremely powerful. The blood spirit was made of blood, but its appearance wasn't distorted. It looked more like a fierce red beast. The whip demon's whip swept across the blood spirit. It caused great damage to the blood spirit. But the blood spirit could recover in the blink of an eye. It had to be said that the environment here gave Sam Mira a home ground advantage. The battle between the tank and the sword-wielding terror demon was the most intense. The tank's rage grew and gradually suppressed the terror demons. The battle between the two messed up the entire theater. Neither side gave way to the other. Maeve watched in awe. It was different from the one-sided suppression before. The two were evenly matched, so the battle was especially intense. Maeve glanced at Qin Zhao again. She realized that he'd taken out a beer from somewhere and was drinking it. He was really watching the show. Aren't you going to help? No matter what grudges you had with them before, at least now you should be the enemy of those monsters. If they lose, you will have to face those terrible monsters alone, Maeve said. Qin Zhao glanced at Maeve. I hope they're all dead. Qin Zhao stated his goal honestly. It wasn't convenient for Qin Zhao to attack, but that didn't mean he didn't want them dead. If the four of them died here, it would be a huge blow to the psionic team. The battle seemed to be balanced, but in reality, it was not stable. As Tank's rage meter soared, his combat power also increased in a straight line. Pun! With a loud bang, Tank's fist smashed the terror demon's great sword into pieces. At the same time, the terror demon was sent flying. Tank roared. He didn't chase after the terror demon first. Instead, he looked in Qin Zhao's direction. He seemed to have lost his mind, but in his mind, there was another voice reminding him. Suddenly, Tank came to his senses. If it was in the past, tanks would definitely not be able to maintain their rationality when their rage level reached 80%. But now, when Tank's rage value was close to 90%, he actually regained his sanity. A crazed, mindless monster and a rational monster were two different concepts. Tank turned to look at the huge demon. The demon stood up. He was even taller than the transformed Tank. With a roar, Tank charged at the demon at a shocking speed. The giant demon raised its palm to block the Tank's brutal punch. He was much stronger than Tank. Tank's fist was grabbed by the demon, and then he swung it out. Tank's body was sent flying like a cannonball, crashing into the wall behind him. Chen Zhao suddenly stood up. The demon's aura was very similar to King Kong's. They were both subordinates of the King of Power. Chen Zhao stared at the enormous demon, his eyes shining. King Kong had once said that if he wanted to strengthen his body, he had to gather the blood of 100 subordinates of the King of Power. He had to use the blood of the King of Power's subordinates to strengthen his body. The demon noticed Chen Zhao's gaze. That gaze made him uncomfortable. It was a naked desire. It was like a hunter and his prey. The demon had wanted to get rid of the other humans first. Then he would attack Chen Zhao. But Chen Zhao's gaze made him uncomfortable. Just now, Chen Zhao had caught the terror demon's sword with 2 fingers. It was clear that Chen Zhao was far more powerful than the terror demon. The demon felt that he was more powerful than the terror demon. But he had to be careful with Chen Zhao. The giant demon's body began to be covered with a layer of metallic skin, like indestructible armor. Chen Zhao suddenly took out a huge container and placed it on the ground. The demon stomped with both feet, bringing with it a gust of wind. Whoosh! Maeve felt like a mountain was pressing down on her. Whether it was her or Chen Zhao, they were like ants in front of that mountain. What the giant demon possessed was pure power. However, Chen Zhao was a bit surprised by the aura he had. It was so solid that Chen Zhao didn't understand. The aura seemed to increase the demon's power by 100 times. But the number of demons was still too low. 1 times 100 was still a world of difference from 10,000. Maeve's vision blurred. Then she saw the demon's arm break. The demon's body was pressed to the ground. Her eyes couldn't follow Chen Zhao's movements. Chen Zhao lifted the demon's severed arm and placed it on the container. Maeve felt her scalp go numb. Meanwhile, the battle on the other side had also changed due to the drastic changes here. No matter if it was the psionic team or the demons, they were all stunned as they looked at the gigantic demon that was instantly defeated. The demon was the strongest among them. It wasn't just a difference in power, but also in level. But the demon had been defeated so easily. They didn't even understand what had happened to the demon. Even the demon's brain was in a state of shock. It was an absolute and defenseless suppression. The demon struggled to stand up several times, but Chen Zhao pressed him back to the ground. His strength was being drained away, and his blood was being forced out. The more blood he lost, the stronger he was. "Can you tell me where your master is?" Chen Zhao asked in demon language. 9 Heaven's Divine Emperor. Chapter 1847. The huge demon looked up at Chen Zhao. "Looks like you don't want to tell me." Chen Zhao grabbed the demon's head and shoulder. "I'll ask you one last time. Are you willing to tell me where your master is in Bermuda?" The huge demon closed its eyes, looking as if it would rather die than submit. "Fine." Maeve's pupils constricted. She saw Chen Zhao tear off the demon's head. Blood spurted out. Maeve was shocked. The huge demon's head suddenly opened its eyes in Chen Zhao's hand. It stared straight at Chen Zhao with a terrifying gaze. But Chen Zhao didn't care. The 4 psionic team members and the 3 demons on the other side all gasped. "Kill him!" the terror demon roared. "Kill that human!" His servants and big-headed demons swarmed toward Chen Zhao. Maeve saw the flood of demons and took a few steps back in fear. Chen Zhao raised his right arm. Holy light cannon. A white blast shot out from Chen Zhao's palm. Boom! In an instant, hundreds of big-headed demons were covered by the white blast and turned to dust. Only a few dozen large-headed evil demons managed to survive. Everyone was stunned. They stared at Chen Zhao in astonishment. Brits and the others knew that Chen Zhao was strong. They knew that Chen Zhao was stronger than all of them. But this time, their understanding of Chen Zhao was refreshed. Chen Zhao had a smile on his face. I don't really want to get involved in your fight. Chen Zhao tossed the head in his left hand. But if you really want me to get involved, I'm happy to. Britz's expression became even more serious. It wasn't because of the demon that looked like Sadako. It was because Chen Zhao was stronger than he'd imagined. Britz somewhat understood Vistana's attitude back then. The difference was so huge that it was hard to even think about fighting back. Chen Zhao actually wasn't in a good mood. Because he'd helped the psionic team solve some problems. The remaining 3 demons weren't weak. But the psionic team members were strong too. In particular, the strength of the tank was clearly superior. Britz was still holding back. So boring. Chen Zhao pouted. Putting away the blood container, he turned to leave. Seeing Chen Zhao leave, Maeve couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Chen Zhao had never attacked her. But with Chen Zhao by her side, she felt a lot of pressure. Moreover, Chen Zhao's attitude towards this hellish scene was indifferent. It made her feel very uncomfortable. But before Chen Zhao left, he made an opening at the bottom of the ship. The ship would slowly sink into the water. The next day, he saw the news. A cruise ship sank in American territorial waters. As always, he covered it up. However, this was understandable. After all, if the public knew about the existence of the supernatural realm, they even learned that there were demons in their world. That would bring about social unrest. The panic of the people might even be used by those with ulterior motives. Chen Zhao understood this. However, just like the previous incident, it happened in the waters near Los Angeles. This was why Chen Zhao had always been unhappy. After all, Chen Zhao saw the entire L.A. area as his territory. Now there was a group of blind people causing trouble in the vicinity. This made Chen Zhao feel like he had been insulted. Wes, did you see the news about the cruise ship sinking in the waters near Los Angeles? Wait. I'll go take a look. Is there something wrong with the news? It was done by a group of demons. Their habitat is near Bermuda, Chen Zhao said. This isn't the first time they've caused trouble in the nearby waters. I've dealt with them 3 or 4 times. Huh! I don't know about this at all. The Anti-Terrorism Security Department must have kept this information and assigned it to the psionic team, Chen Zhao said. Last night. Chen Zhao told him what had happened last night, except for the game between him and the American Air Force. Are these guys trying to steal our rice bowls so blatantly? Wes sounded rather dissatisfied. What do you think? Chen Zhao asked. Are those demons in Bermuda? Yes, they should be in that area, but I'm not sure of the exact location. How strong are these demons? I think there are a few very powerful beings among these demons. There might even be some that are on par with me. Chen Zhao wasn't very sure. Then let the psionic team die, Wes said. If we leak this information to the government, they'll definitely give us a mission. With the Anti-Terrorism Security Department's personality, they'll definitely keep this mission. Are you sure this plan can trick the psionic team? Chen Zhao asked. Don't let us trick ourselves. Cover up some information. As long as they don't know the exact information and the demon's strength, I think the psionic team will be happy to steal our mission. West was indeed a sly old fox. He didn't feel guilty at all for doing such a ruthless thing. Anyway, you'll do it, Chen Zhao said. Don't let the government know that we're the ones behind this. Never go against the government. The Anti-Terrorism Security Department was far from the government. At noon, Stephen arrived at Chen Zhao's moon villa. 2 of his bodyguards came along with him. Wow, Princess Chen? Is she princess? Stephen exclaimed as he looked at the huge princess. He was already used to the princess form in the past. He wasn't that shocked. But now, Princess was twice as big as before. Stephen stood in front of the princess with a body as big as a hill. He could feel the oppressive aura emanating from the princess. What did almost 3,000 kilograms mean? It was almost the weight of an adult Asian elephant. Of course, Princess wasn't even as big as an Asian elephant. This was mainly because Princess' muscles were tighter. But it was still shocking. Stephen's two bodyguards, Frank and Famtus, were also shocked. Shin, how did Princess become so big? She's been eating a lot lately, Qin Zhao said. Stephen rolled his eyes. But he knew that Qin Zhao had secrets. Can Princess handle those crocodiles? Raymond is enough, Qin Zhao said. Although the princess had been reborn, there was still a fundamental gap between her and Raymond. Also, Princess has to take care of her child. Don't bring her. Raymond can handle those crocodiles. Chapter 1848. How about we bring Briar and Bramble too? Qin Zhao rolled his eyes. Have Princess deal with the crocodiles and bring Briar and Bramble. Those two are good at causing trouble. Have them deal with the crocodiles. Don't get eaten by them. Fine. Actually, I want to bring Princess, Briar, and Bramble to my house. I'll call Raymond out. Oh, what car did you drive? Qin Zhao asked. Big truck. Sure, no problem. Qin Zhao clapped his hands. Raymond shot out of the grass like a bolt of lightning. Even though Frank and Famtus had seen Raymond before, they were still shocked by his appearance. Stephen took Raymond away. Qin Zhao also told Raymond to do what he needed to do. After dropping Raymond off on Stephen's land, Famtus and Frank were a bit worried. They didn't dare to open Raymond. After all, Qin Zhao wasn't here. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and open the truck. Mr. Stephen, that snake won't eat us, right? After all, Mr. Qin isn't here. Don't worry, Stephen said nonchalantly. I'm very close to Raymond. He even slept in my arms when he was young. Okay, Mr. Stephen. If that snake is in danger, you have to protect us. Frank pulled open the door of the container, and Raymond jumped out. Raymond's huge body made all of Frank's hair stand on end. Raymond's tail swung at Frank. Frank was slapped to the ground. Haha. Raymond, sorry. He didn't mean to say bad things about you. Stephen went up and touched Raymond's body. Raymond lowered his head and let Stephen touch him. Raymond had clearly done it on purpose. Raymond, I'll leave this place to you, Stephen said. Raymond nodded and slipped into the bushes. Frank got up gloomily and returned to Stephen's side. Mr. Stephen, Famtus also said why that snake only wants to take revenge on me? Famtus knows Raymond, Stephen said matter-of-factly. Fine. Famtus thought of the night he stayed over at Qin Zhao's house. When Stephen was running for his life, she had escorted him to Qin Zhao's house in the middle of the night. And she saw with her own eyes that Raymond tore the monster that was chasing after Stephen into pieces. It was not a pleasant memory. Mr. Stephen, can that guy really handle so many crocodiles? Suddenly, a 5-meter-long crocodile descended from the sky. He landed right in front of Frank. The crocodile's neck had been broken, and the angle of its head and body was very uncoordinated. However, when he suddenly landed in front of Frank, the three of them were startled. Frank, don't you think you should be more careful with your words? Frank wanted to cry. Mr. Stephen, is that guy so vengeful? Right, Raymond has killed people before. Stephen patted Frank's shoulder. Snakes are very vengeful. I heard that in Africa, reticulated pythons will take revenge on the local natives. There was a real incident where the partner of a reticulated python was killed by a native, and that reticulated python killed 12 people from that tribe in one night. Famutius added fuel to the fire. Uncle, call on and I plan to go to England the day after tomorrow. Xianli stood before Qin Zhao, looking a bit reserved. Did you find any clues? Qin Zhao asked. There's a clue. We found out that the original owner of the Book of Prometheus was a man called Aaron Lebos. In 1970, he donated the Book of Prometheus to the British Museum. Now that he's already 98 years old, Perhaps he doesn't even need to steal from the British Museum to find out about the contents of the Book of Prometheus from Aaron Lebos. Xianli said. Qin Zhao thought about it and nodded. Take this credit card. Qin Zhao had prepared this credit card a long time ago. He could check the credit card's spending records anytime and anywhere. So, as long as Xianli wanted to spend money, Qin Zhao could roughly know their whereabouts. Of course, this was apart from the credit card. Moore, Lisa, and Ruan Faxben would also report their whereabouts in real time. Thank you, Uncle. Come back safely. Qin Zhao hugged Xianli. Okay. Golden apple? Qin Zhao really wanted to know if the golden apple was actually edible. But he also knew that in the magic world, many things that sounded like food actually had nothing to do with food. Uncle, can I go on adventures in the future? Deidara looked at Qin Zhao with watery eyes. Qin Zhao's face twitched. If you're stronger than Xianli, I'll let you go on adventures. As a parent, they wanted to keep their child by their side for the rest of their lives. Because all parents thought that their child was a child that hadn't grown up. No matter how old the child was, they all thought so. For example, Xianli was going to find some golden apple. How much preparation had Qin Zhao done? Any parent would do the same. Qin Zhao really wanted to find the golden apple himself. Then, he went to the headquarters. He found Lisa, Moore, and Ruan Faxben to ask them about their preparations. They'd all prepared some equipment. And large amounts of medicine. At the same time, Qin Zhao warned them to prioritize safety. President, I've finished the magic tool you asked me to make last time, Ruan Faxben said. Over the past few days he had been working hard and finally completed the magic tool that Qin Zhao had requested. Ruan Faxi was very curious about who designed the design of the magic tool. It was definitely a design that surpassed genius. He couldn't even imagine how exquisite it was. If he hadn't seen the design, Ruan Faxben would be a frog at the bottom of a well. Only after seeing it did he understand how vast the world was. Although he'd completed the tool according to the design, it didn't mean that he was at the same level. Design was design, manufacturing was manufacturing. He was just a high-level worker. The truly powerful person was the one who designed the tool. That was someone that he couldn't compare to or reach. Take me to see, Qin Zhao said. Ruan Faxben brought Qin Zhao to his lab. Qin Zhao saw that Nur was locked in his lab. Nur was still glaring at Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao ignored Nur's gaze. Ruan Faxben pressed a few keys on the lab's wall. The wall opened. There was a metal ball about 2 meters in diameter inside. It was covered in protrusions. Is this it? Chapter 1849. Qin Zhao lifted the metal ball with one hand. Gurnier sucked in a cold breath. So strong. This magic tool wasn't much in the eyes of humans. But to demons, it was a terrifying demon-slaying weapon. Of course, the core of the weapon hadn't been installed yet. The angelic crystal was the true core. Ruan Faxben had only made the outer shell. Qin Zhao put the weapon away. Then he looked at Gyunel. She seems to be in good condition. Gyunel was chained up in the lab like a dog. However, her arrogance made her unwilling to yield even in the face of despair. Ruan Faxben looked at Gyunel. Gyunel, if you can't control your gaze again, maybe I'll use your eyeballs for an experiment. Gyunel lowered her head, avoiding Qin Zhao and Ruan Faxben's gazes. Qin Zhao and Ruan Faxben walked out of the lab. I heard she's related to you? Qin Zhao asked. Ruan Faxben was already prepared for this question. There were no secrets in the headquarters. When he'd asked Gyunel last time, they talked about how the matter would spread. It was only a matter of time before it reached Qin Zhao's ears. If there's no accident, she should be my daughter, Ruan Faxben said. Your daughter? Qin Zhao looked at Ruan in surprise. Why was this different from what he'd heard? The daughter of my student and I, Ruan Faxben said. Ruan Faxben said. She was my former student, a Fumin. We had sex, and then one day, A human found out that I wanted to do research on her, so she ran away pregnant. Qin Zhao's face darkened. Ruan Fasheben was really despicable. He'd used his student, woman, and the mother of his child as an experiment. President, I didn't want to do anything, Ruan Fasheben said helplessly. I just want to take some blood and skin tissue. It won't hurt her at all. She's thinking too much. You've never thought about getting them back? Yes, but she's purposely avoiding me. What can I do? Ruan Fasheben said helplessly. My connections are limited. I can't find them either. Then what do we do with her? Chen Zhao asked. Let's lock him up for now. Ruan sighed. Send her to the dungeon, Chen Zhao said. At least the conditions there are not bad. Just then, Chen Zhao looked in the direction of the lab. She doesn't seem to be well behaved. Didn't you chain her tightly? Ruan Faxburn scratched his head. The lock was randomly found. Gurnier poked his head out and glanced at both ends of the corridor. In the end, he happened to see Qin Zhao and Ruan Faxaben standing in the corridor. Gurnier immediately returned to the lab and broke through the window. Gurnier somersaulted in the air, kneeled on one knee, and landed steadily on the ground. Just then, Gendra walked over. Gatkala looked at the broken window on the second floor, then at Gunal. Did you go the wrong way? Gunal charged straight at Jankira and attacked without saying a word. Gage lifted his leg and kicked Neil in the stomach. Gakira had the bloodline of a berserker, and was several times stronger than ordinary people in his normal state. Neil rolled a few times on the ground and stood up again. Just then, she revealed a bracer on her wrist. She'd stolen this bracer from Ruan Faxaben's lab. She'd seen Ruan Faxaben use this bracer before. Neil pressed a button on the bracer. Instantly, a screen of light shot out from the bracer and enveloped Gakira. But before it could land on Gakira, the screen disappeared. Qin Zhao and Ruan Faxaben looked down at Neil from the window. Your bracer doesn't seem to be very useful. This gauntlet needs to be infused with magic. Where did she get the magic? Since it needs mana, how did she activate it? It should be her pain power. I didn't think that it could be activated too. Gurnier cursed in exasperation. It was at this moment that Gatella rushed over again. Uppercut, left hook, right hook, mystical dragon tail whip. A series of consecutive moves directly beat Gunnier to the point where he couldn't even tell which way was north. However, Neil, who had the primordial bloodline, stood up again. Gunal then took out a large piece of bright red cloth from his bosom and covered his body. In the blink of an eye, Gurnier disappeared from where he stood. Oh, a magic item that can turn invisible! Qin Zhao was surprised. Ruan Faxaben shook his head. This invisibility cloak is good for ordinary people, but it's much worse than Osalisa's invisibility. Osalisa's invisibility can even completely cover one's aura. We can equip Klaus and the others. If we equip them, we need to consider putting a mana source. Otherwise, they won't be able to use it at all. Neil was originally invisible. However, Jankira punched the air, and Gunal immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. Neil also found it unbelievable that Gakira could attack her while she was invisible. Neil didn't understand at all. After entering the Tower of Trials, they faced hundreds and thousands of monsters. They needed to predict the monsters' attacks and sense their attack patterns. If they couldn't do these two things, they wouldn't even be able to pass the first level. Gakira's main job was to forge weapons, but that didn't mean that she was weak. Of course, Gatkala's battle prowess was among the bottom few in the entire association. But if she couldn't even deal with Neil, then she should find a place to slit her own throat. Seeing that invisibility was useless against Gakira, Neil could only put away the cloak. She realized that using the cloak continuously made her weaker and weaker. Neil took out a crystal ball the size of a ping-pong ball. Ruan, how many magic items did you give her? President, my things are all in the lab. How would I know how many she took? Ruan Faxaben was frustrated too, because he usually left large amounts of magic items and materials in the lab. He didn't even know how many things were in the lab. Neil smashed the crystal ball on the ground. The black gas in the crystal ball enveloped Neil. Genji threw a punch, but when his fist landed on Gurnier's body, it felt like he was punching air. What's the effect of the crystal ball? Chapter 1850. That's a temporary mist crystal, Ruan said. It can be temporarily immune to physical attacks. Immune to physical attacks? Qin Zhao tilted his head and glanced at Ruan. Of course not completely. Ruan Faxi didn't want to let Qin Zhao try. As the creator of this fog crystal, Ruan Faxi knew the limits of this fog crystal. Generally speaking, spiritualists who possessed atomization or other elemental magic could reassemble their bodies even if they were physically attacked or if their atomization form was scattered. However, the ability obtained from the mist crystal couldn't gather again. If a physical attack exceeded a certain level, the mist form would scatter and the body would be severely injured. To put it simply, the mist crystal's ability was a weakened version of true elemental spells. Of course, elemental spells weren't truly invincible. There were countless ways to counter elemental spells. For example, Qin Zhao's mouth of gluttony could directly devour elements. It could directly pose a fatal threat to the user. However, Qin Zhao's level was overwhelming. Another example was Jalanash's elemental spells, which were the bane of elemental spells. This was an elemental counter. Elemental spells had strong physical resistance. However, their magic resistance was greatly reduced. For example, if a person used water or mist form and the opponent threw a curse at them, they would basically take as much damage as they could. The magic damage would even be several times higher than the original damage. Thus, elemental spells were also very lacking. Realizing that his attack was useless, Gakira's fist suddenly became hot, and he reached into the mist. Ah! Neil screamed and the mist effect disappeared. Gakira was the weakest in the association, but he was more than enough to deal with Neil. Even if Neil stole Ruan's various magic tools, it was useless. The difference in power was obvious. If Neil used her ancient bloodline to take Gakira's attack head-on, she might have a chance to escape. However, she had to use all sorts of magic tools that she wasn't familiar with. Most of them were weakened versions of traditional spells. How could she deal with Gakira? Neil vomited a few mouthfuls of blood. That punch hadn't hurt her physically, but the heat. Gurnier knelt on one knee, even though she was injured. She was injured, but it also provided her with the power of pain. Gurnier patted his shoes. Suddenly, Gyuno felt weightless. The moment she took a step forward, Gurnier had already traveled more than 10 meters. Genkira's eyes widened. So fast. Nur finally understood. Fight Gekla or anyone else in the society. She didn't have the slightest chance of winning. So she decided to run away. It was all thanks to Ron Faxman's experiments in the lab that he didn't avoid her. Nur could feel that the pain was decreasing rapidly. The ability to move as if he was flying was very refreshing. But it couldn't be maintained for too long. At this moment, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky without any warning. Bang! Gurnier was struck in the head by the lightning and was instantly blasted away. He stood up with difficulty. All of the magic tools on Gurnier's body had failed. Gurnier wobbled and turned to look at Qin Zhao and Ruan Fax burn on the windowsill. Come on, kill me! Kill me if you dare! Gurnier roared furiously. In an instant, the originally calm dark clouds in the sky flashed with lightning and thunder. Rumble! Between the dark clouds, there was a terrifying thunderstorm. In the blink of an eye, the headquarters of the society seemed to be enveloped by the apocalypse. The atmosphere was so heavy that everyone felt suffocated. A terrifying bolt of lightning descended from the sky. But it didn't just flash by. Instead, it streaked across the ground, leaving a scorching chasm. It charged toward Gurnier. Gurnier finally felt the threat of death. The bolt of lightning was too terrifying. It was more terrifying than she could imagine. At that moment, all of her confidence, courage, and pride turned into nothingness. I admit defeat! I admit defeat! Rumble. the lightning finally stopped before Gurnier, but all of its energy was released in that instant. A huge pit appeared in the ground. The surrounding ground was scorched too. Gurnier was blasted away by the explosion. Ruan Faxben was quite annoyed too. After all, Gurnier was his daughter. Qin Zhao had scolded his daughter in front of him. What could he do? Luckily, Qin Zhao didn't kill him. Ruan Faxben started to complain. Even if Gurnier wanted to escape, she should have chosen a time when Qin Zhao wasn't there. Escape when Qin Zhao was at the headquarters. Was that any different from suicide? In the headquarters, Qin Zhao was like a god. Nothing could escape Qin Zhao's eyes. Ruan Faxben walked before Gurnier. Follow me. Gurnier stood up with difficulty and followed silently. Ruan Faxben brought Gurnier to the dungeon. A few rooms in the dungeon were already occupied. Mor Raz stood before one of the glass rooms and talked to the occupant inside. The connected cells were all occupied by her former companions. Mor Raz would basically visit them every day. Only half a year had passed of their 3-year sentence. But they'd basically accepted reality now. Ruan Faxben pointed at an empty glass cell and said to Gurnier, Go in. How long are you going to lock me up for? Until I think you can come out, Ruan Faxben said. Give me an exact time. There's no exact time, Ruan Faxben said. Ruan Faxben said, You shouldn't have chosen to run away now. You've wasted a chance. This is your only chance. Gurnier frowned. She suddenly realized that Ruan Faxben had let her go on purpose. That lock was specially prepared for her by Ruan Faxben, and even the magic equipment was deliberately shown to her. Give me another chance. I won't make the same mistake twice. No chance. Ruan Faxben shook his head. You've already wasted your only chance. The President won't allow you to escape again, nor will he allow me to let you go again. I know a few information. What I want to know is more information, more accurate information, not vague and uncertain information. Let me out and I'll tell you. Gurnier, you don't have any other choice. Ruan Faxben said. Ruan Faxben said, Forget it. We'll talk when you're willing to talk. Just calm down here. Chapter 1851. Portia, take care of the house, Qin Zhao said. Boss, where are you going? Xian Li's going to travel around the world, Qin Zhao said, pushing his suitcase. I'm going to send her off. Boss, I can't take care of so many kids by myself. Portia's face was filled with reluctance. She'd only been to Japan once in her 20 years, and she'd gone with Qin Zhao. In the end, she owed a huge sum of money in Japan and even encountered the once-in-a-thousand-years Mount Fuji eruption. How old was Xian Li? She'd be able to travel around the world. Qin Zhao glanced at Portia and narrowed his eyes. Oh, you asked me for a day and a half off a few days ago, right? Boss, I got it. I'll take care of the kids. Good girl. Qin Zhao finally smiled in satisfaction. Oh, how was your audition a few days ago? Portia turned her head away, not wanting to answer the question. Although she had Stephen's introduction, her performance in the audition studio was too poor. The result was obvious. She'd lost the role. Sometimes, even Stephen's face didn't matter when he was being cheated. What face did Stephen have? It could even be said that Stephen could recommend a secondary role with just a word. It could be said that if Stephen wanted to recommend a secondary character, it would only take a word from him. This also showed how low Portia's acting standards were. It's okay. I'll ask Stephen for a recommendation next time. Portia was instantly filled with energy. Boss, don't worry. I'll take good care of your kids. Let's go, Xian Li. Xian Li didn't have much luggage. 2 not-so-big suitcases were filled. When Qin Zhao and Xian Li arrived at the airport, Fei Lai ran over too. She was supposed to be at Angel Beach. A while later, Risa, Mor, and Ruan Faxben arrived one after another. Then Kallan arrived too. Ruan, where's your luggage? Qin Zhao looked at the empty-handed Ruan Fashiban. Most of my luggage is contraband, so I chose to check it through other channels, Ruan Fashiban said. You sure know how to be lazy. Xian Li, be careful. Fei Lai hugged Xian Li. Yes, Andy Fei Lai. Xian Li had always known, even though they weren't her real parents. But their concern for her was genuine. Ever since Xian Li decided to go on an adventure, Qin Zhao and Fei Lai had never said that they would try to find the golden apple. They only had one request, and that was to be safe. They had patiently repeated this request countless times. That was a request, or even a request, that only a family member would make. When you come back, our whole family will search for the legendary treasure island. Auntie Fei Lai, I'll come back safely. Qin Zhao was on the other side, his arm resting on Lisa's shoulder. If anything happens to Xian Li, I will send the three of you to hell. I mean what I say. Risa and Ruan Faxi suddenly regretted instigating Xian Li in the first place. Moore, on the other hand, was innocent. He wasn't involved in Risa and Ruan's conspiracy at all. All right, your flight is about to arrive. Go into the departure lounge. Qin Zhao and Fei Lai sent the five to the departure lounge and watched as they entered. Fei Lai, do you still have to work today? I have to go back to the coastal rescue team. I asked Robio for 3 hours of leave. Okay, I'll send you back. No need, Fei Lai said. Go to the supermarket and buy some things. We're almost out of daily necessities. There were many people in the house, so things were consumed quickly. Okay. Be careful. After leaving the airport, Qin Zhao called Andrews first. Andrews, I need to withdraw some cash, $200,000. I'll go get it now. Help me prepare it. Qin Zhao often used cash, so he always kept some cash at home. This was the benefit of being a top client of the bank. He didn't need to make an appointment to withdraw large amounts of cash. If it was 2 years ago, Qin Zhao would need to make an appointment to withdraw $10,000. When Qin Zhao arrived at the bank, Amira knew that Qin Zhao was coming, so she came looking for him at the right time. Qin, do you want to come to my office? Business? Or private? Qin Zhao asked. It's not a big deal. Amira shrugged. My father's construction site is about to be completed. He heard that you Chinese are all good at feng shui, so he wants to ask you to check it. Ever since that incident, Amira's father, Depp, believed in such things. After hearing about feng shui, he wanted to ask Qin Zhao to check it out for him. I don't know how. You don't? I can introduce you to an expert in this area, Qin Zhao said. Also, the person I'm introducing is very skilled. His fees aren't as crazy as mine. All right, give me his contact information. Qin Zhao gave Li Qing's number to Amira. Oh, be more respectful to this person, Qin Zhao said seriously. She's my teacher. Qin Zhao wasn't worried about Amira's attitude. Amira always had a professional smile and attitude to everyone. She definitely wouldn't let Li Qing suffer. But Amira's father, Depp, was a jerk. An arrogant, rude bastard. After hearing that this person was Qin Zhao's teacher, Amira also became serious. Don't worry, I won't mistreat your teacher. Is the cash ready? Qin Zhao asked. Yes. I'll have Andrews send it over. A while later, Andrews came with the money. Mr. Qin, here's the cash you withdrew. Please count it. Qin Zhao nodded and turned to Amira. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. After leaving the office and passing by the bank, Qin Zhao saw a figure. It was KG Sayer. KG Sayer also saw Qin Zhao. The two glanced at each other and saw the displeasure in each other's eyes. Qin Zhao thought for a moment. Should he greet that woman? Forget it. He wasn't familiar with her at all. Suddenly, 6 masked people came in from the bank. The first to react was the bank's security guard, but before he could do anything, a gun was already pressed against his temple. Don't react. Please cooperate. It's fun. A masked man fired a volley of bullets from above. Clatter, clatter. Raise your hands and get on the ground. You're facing a robbery. Please don't give me a reason to kill you. Chapter 1852. Qin Zhao immediately laid on the ground and covered his head with his hands. KG Sayer's face was full of mockery. But just then, a masked robber walked up. The gun butt smashed heavily on KG Sayer's neck. Lie down and cover your head. KG Sayer stumbled and fell to the ground. KG Sayer was both shocked and furious. But the situation was against her, so she could only lie on the ground obediently. KG Sayer turned to look at Qin Zhao. She realized that Qin Zhao was looking at her with a mocking expression. KG Sayer was furious. What's there to be proud of? By now, the bank was completely under control. More than a dozen bank staff and customers had become hostages. 2 masked robbers armed with automatic rifles were watching over a dozen hostages. Then, the bank's counter door was opened. One had to know that it could only be opened from inside. This meant that there was a mole among the bank staff. These robbers were too professional. In a minute, they'd already taken out 2 boxes from the bank's vault. Qin Zhao lay on the ground and looked at the masked robbers who'd come out from the backstage. 2 boxes? These 2 boxes could hold a few $1,000,000. But Qin Zhao felt that they'd only gotten so little money after such a big fight. It was really child's play. The inside of the 2 boxes seemed to be wrapped in aluminum. Even Qin Zhao's little world couldn't sense what was in the boxes. But they probably hadn't been taken out from the vault. Instead, they'd been taken out from the safe. Their target wasn't the cash. It made sense. This was Citibank's regional headquarters. If they wanted to rob cash, they wouldn't be able to get much with so few people. With their professional methods, it would be easier for them to rob a branch with a weaker defense, and they would be able to rob more money. Just then, Qin Zhao realized that the police had arrived. Oh no! The police are here! Our escape route is blocked. A masked robber had been guarding the window outside, monitoring the situation outside. Just then, Qin Zhao's phone rang. He picked it up. Hello, Fei Lai. Oh, we've run out of female products. Remember to buy some when you go to the supermarket later. Okay, I'll try my best. I'm in the bank now, but I'm robbed. Hang up the phone, now! Hang up now. The 2 masked robbers guarding the hostages both pointed their guns at him. Let's not talk about it now. The robbers are pointing their guns at me now. All right, don't take too long. When KG Sayer looked at Qin Zhao, she looked at him as if he was crazy. This fellow is seeking death, isn't he? As soon as Qin Zhao hung up, another call came in. Don't answer the phone! The masked robber stood before Qin Zhao and pointed the gun at his head. Qin Zhao looked at the masked robber and said matter-of-factly, Let's understand each other. I'm not going to tell anyone. Don't answer the phone. Do you want to die? But the threat didn't stop Qin Zhao from picking up the phone. Hang up. Hang up now. The masked robber's voice grew louder. I'm going to shoot. Hey. Chen, are you in the office? It was Amira who called him. Yeah, I'm being held hostage right now. Qin Zhao said helplessly. The robber is pointing a gun at my head. Are you kidding? I'm serious. Qin Zhao opened the video chat. Look. Take care of them, Amira said. The thing they want is very important. Is it okay if I kill them by accident? It's okay. They're robbers. Oh, take care of the bank's surveillance too. Just then, the masked robber loaded his gun. The other hostages didn't dare to look up. Just as the robber was about to shoot, Qin Zhao attacked without any warning. He grabbed the automatic rifle. Before the robber could react, his hand was empty. The gun was already in Qin Zhao's hand. Bang! Qin Zhao raised the gun and smashed it into the robber's face with the butt. The other robber's reaction wasn't slow. He quickly turned his gun toward Qin Zhao. Groin kick! Qin Zhao lifted the gun with one hand and kicked with the other. The 2 robbers guarding the hostages fell to the ground. Qin Zhao raised the gun and fired at the remaining 4 robbers. Da-da-da! The 4 masked robbers immediately hid behind pillars and bunkers. All the bullets missed. Qin Zhao threw away the rifle in anger. As expected, he was cursed by the bullets. The hostages didn't even dare to look up. They trembled in the gunshots. Qin Zhao had already appeared behind a pillar. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. The 4 robbers were all beaten to the ground. Qin Zhao picked up the phone. Amira, it's done. Amira was speechless. 30 seconds. In just 30 seconds, the bank crisis was solved. The police broke in. Qin Zhao stood there with his hands raised. A few policemen surrounded him with their guns. Hands on your head and get on the ground. Sometimes the police were no different from robbers. Stop, he's not a robber. Amira had already followed the police in. Qin Zhao and Amira exchanged glances. Amira glanced at the 2 boxes beside Qin Zhao. She opened the boxes and checked the contents. Qin Zhao saw many documents in the boxes. Judging from Amira's nervous expression, the documents were clearly very important. By now, the police had already learned what had happened from the hostages. Most of the hostages didn't dare to look up, but they could still vaguely see Qin Zhao's actions. The police were shocked by Qin Zhao's abilities, but they didn't make things difficult for him. After all, he defeated 6 armed robbers by himself. He was basically like the main characters in movies. Is there anything missing? No. Thank you, Qin. Amira heaved a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, Qin Zhao was here this time. Otherwise, she'd be in great trouble. The police came over and asked a few more questions. Qin Zhao answered them truthfully. He also explained how he dealt with the 6 robbers. Of course, the police didn't watch the surveillance, so they couldn't know the exact process. KG Sayer was also being interviewed. She glanced at Qin Zhao from afar. She was also shocked by Qin Zhao's abilities. At the beginning, she'd seen Qin Zhao lying on the ground so decisively. She'd thought that Qin Zhao was really a coward. In the end, Qin Zhao shocked everyone with a single move. Just now, she'd secretly watched Qin Zhao's counterattack. The entire process had been too fast. First, he'd killed the 2 robbers guarding the hostages. Then, he'd forced the remaining 4 robbers behind cover with his gun. Finally, he'd finished them off like a tornado. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.